creature like that, how would it ever die?
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Looked like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
When I gave them their official name in my server, when I saved them as a file, it was like 104 Redux, or no, it was the intro video, because I did like 5 different versions of the intro video.
Oh right.
It was like it was like version 1.2 Redux, or Redux Final. No, Redux Final. This is the 176. I knew which one to grab. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into making these intro videos. I'm telling you.
Especially doing edits and then going back and watching them and going back to an old edit and going back from there.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, I love this, but that transition didn't quite work. So let me go back and redo the entire thing. And then you're like, oh, well, that's a cool effect. So let me go ahead and swing that too. So it's a bunch of.
I do that with music. If I add or change an instrument and save it, and I'm just so sure it's gonna be great, and I even think it's great at a time, I still save it the version previous, and then A/B them and be like, crap, all that work, and I don't actually like it as much as the first one.
Yeah.
Crumpet it is. Fuck it.
Yeah. Well, welcome in everybody. Season 2, Episode 2 of Beyond the Shadows podcast. My name is Victus.
I am Aeon,
And I'm Paul.
and I have some exciting scientific news this week.
Exciting? I better get
Yes.
excited or I'm going to be
It's
really
very
really
exciting.
upset.
So
Same.
theoretical physicists finally figured out how to figure out why the chicken crossed the road. There's a formula for it.
Oh. What's the formula?
Well, so the only problem is it only works for spherical chickens in a vacuum. Okay, I'm the physics nerd. Fine.
I got
I thought it was so funny when I heard it the first time. I was like, that's exactly what they do. It'd be spherical chickens in a vacuum.
Speaking of scientists and science news, did you see? I think it was Chinese. Somebody, either Chinese or Koreans, managed nuclear fission for 1,000 seconds.
Really, that's the longest yet.
That's
By
the
quite a
longest.
lot.
Yeah, I think the previous record was like 16 seconds.
But
They
did
kept the
it?
loop.
But
ahead.
did it generate enough power to run itself at least?
No, I don't think so. I didn't get into the nitty gritty of it, but it did run continuously, a continuous loop of plasma for 1,000 seconds, breaking the record by hundreds fold. So there,
'cause
that's exciting.
Because that'll be the question: is should you get it to where you can sustain it indefinitely, right? Okay, now we're gonna have to find out, was it all worth it? Can we actually produce enough electricity to both run the machine and produce excess electricity to generate out into the grid? Otherwise, it's just a super fun science trick.
It makes me think that they were able to create stable fission and generate the power, which is why it ran for exactly 1,000 seconds as opposed to like 21.21 seconds. See what I'm saying?
Right.
Exactly 1,000 seconds tells me like 1,000 seconds is our threshold, and if it hits that, we're going to shut it down for safety reasons, just to make sure.
Because it's still technically a giant prototype.
Yes,
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
I imagine we'll see more and more success with that as we incorporate AI into the calibration program, because you're making billions of calculations for the magnetic field all along the way. And if it can't keep up and it can't be flexible and almost be predictive, it's hard to keep it sustained. So I imagine you'll see more and more success, because I think that's been crunching power for to make the calculations to adjust the magnetic field to compress the hydrogen down into a single place has been the biggest stopping point. you know, you have an unpredicted fluctuation that doesn't fit the model, and then it loses cohesion, and then you don't have a stable magnetic field anymore. So I imagine that'll get better and better.
It makes you wonder if AI didn't have a play in it because it was so successful for such a long period of time.
Probably. That we'll probably I think what we're missing now is not equipment, because the equipment is pretty brute force. I think the issue we're missing is finesse in programming an algorithm. So probably a solvable thing. I think I've always thought it was a solvable thing. The question I've always had was, is it going to generate enough excess electricity to be worth, you know, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze?
Right.
So yeah, it's exciting. That's really cool, because I think it's a great answer. I think it's a great answer. You know, the only thing that'll be irradiated at the end is if you ever shut it down, the inner shell is slightly irradiated, but not on the levels of, like, you know, fission material.
Yeah. So before we get started, go ahead.
Speaking of nuclear reactions, have you looked up Enron and what they're doing?
The egg?
The egg!
I couldn't remember if I dreamed that or you.
No, the nuclear reactor egg can power your home for 10 years without new fuel rods.
I don't mean to burst your bubble.
Is it fake?
It's fake.
Fuck!
It was like what did they call it? Like a concept?
A spoof?
Yeah, like a spoof concept. Like, it's something they want to do, but they're using, you know, like, hey, this is a viable thing for the future. I saw it and I got excited. I was getting ready to start sharing it, and then I started digging, and then I found out it was like one line at the end that said something like, this could be possible in our near future.
Because it has a thing on there like you can pre-order yours and everything.
It's a spoof. Yeah,
it's a spoof.
Unfortunately, it's a spoof. Yeah, it was great. It's because signed me up. Sure.
I'm so disappointed.
You want to know how much my electric bill was this month? All electric heat.
They even had like energy figures, like how much, you know, the average home, you know, costs in like 10 years for energy was like, you know, 50 to 95,000, which sounds, you know, over 10 years, you know, depending on your area and what kind of home, you know, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they were saying it'd be like a fraction of that. And if you're only using 20% enriched uranium,
like 9/10, that's a fraction.
Yes, that's a fraction. So
fraction.
So is, you know, 89/90ths. I mean, but I think the intent was it was gonna be fractional.
89/90ths.
Yeah,
well, that's fractional.
Well, you know what the implication was. Anyway, the point was they were saying it was out of 20% enriched uranium, which also in my mind didn't sound like enough.
Yeah.
And I've not heard of a nuclear reactor that actually generates actual electricity. They generate steam that powers big, you know, stuff, but, you know, radiation doesn't translate direct to electricity. Yeah, so I didn't know how they were making it so small format, but I was like, this is great. Yes, I'll take one. I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'll take
absolutely.
It. Sign me up. Off the grid, done. I'll take it.
I was fixing to submit my information to put it myself on the waiting list, and I realized it was a spoof, and I was like, yeah, they're just collecting.
Well, that's disappointing.
So
cool. Also, it looked like an Apple product, which is kind of cool.
It really did.
It's like if Apple made a nuclear reactor, what shape would it be? Well, a sphere is too straightforward, so it'd be an egg.
Yeah, or an apple.
Checks out. Or an apple. Yeah, an actual apple.
So, I need to say, before we get too far into this, or get into this at all, I need to announce a trigger warning. Trigger warning. Hold on, sound effect. Do we have a sound effect for trigger warning? We don't specifically, but I have this. Trigger warning. Today we will be looking at pictures of not alive people. So if this is not your thing, please do not watch, and we'll catch you next week. Because this week we are covering spontaneous human combustion.
Done.
Wait, do we have that sound? Do we have it sound?
I thought we did, but I don't think so.
Nope.
No,
ancient astronaut theorists proposed.
Yeah, we don't have the I think we have a quack 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 quack.
Yeah, we
If we
had
could
that.
have all those old sounds from that old school Price is Right, it would be amazing.
We could do that.
We
can
could
do that.
do that.
We could do that. But yeah, so there are going to be photos of not living persons. So be warned. You have been warned, and it is in the description of the stream today. If you cannot stomach or handle people that are not with us anymore, this is not the episode for you because it's going to be graphic.
So now
yes,
we've published it and we've told you.
Yes,
If you stay, it's your own fault.
we have our legal advisor here is nodding along, telling us we're doing the right thing, isn't he? Yes. See, haha.
Listen, I think we give too many warnings, too many trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Everyone is triggered by everything. I just have lost patience for it in spite of my profession pushing it forward.
Yeah, the
Okay.
fact that we have to say unalived.
That's super
ED.
crazy.
Yeah. Also, it grates
Yeah.
on my nerves.
They'll
That's,
probably
that's
start
a terrible way to
censoring
use.
our conspiracy theory ones because we discussed in too graphic of detail the Kennedy stuff.
Yeah.
By saying certain words for pew pew.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you won't be able to call them. You won't be able to call extraterrestrials aliens anymore. They have to be like non-native organic selves, non-native organic selves.
Non-native non-Earth bound entities, biological entities.
Non-Earth biologicals is, I think, what they're calling them.
Non-Earth biological nebs. So we gotta
Neb?
call them nebs now. Neb
No,
Flanders.
I'm sure that'll be.
So
Even the Mormons have gotten in on it. They know more than a derogative.
Non-human carbon selves, non-human carbon sentience.
non-Earth based carbon sentient entities.
Yeah, we need like a 7-word descriptor to make it take forever to say it every time. And then do a whole-
Non-human based carbon based extraterrestrial. No, I can't do it. I can't do it.
No.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
So we'll see if we can come up with something that sounds funny when you acronym it.
We'll come up with something. We'll audio clip it and we'll put it in the soundboard.
If I can make it say nubbins, I'm done.
So if you're a recurring listener to the show, you know that it's the last episode of the month where we usually do rapid fire, but we wanted to do spontaneous human combustion so badly, and especially after our technical issues last weekend. Curse you, internet. We really wanted to push out the spontaneous human combustion episode. I think we're all very excited about it. I know I am.
Yeah.
I work
Yes.
diligently on this.
Yes, it's a great topic.
I've got oodles of photos with names
good.
and persons. And not all the photos I have correlate with the research that I have, but that's okay because we do a deep dive into a few of the people. You know what? Let's give a dictionary definition of what spontaneous human combustion is. Wrong keyboard. This is my life. Spontaneous human combustion. Spontaneous human combustion, SHC, is a pseudoscientific idea that a living person can burst into flames without an obvious external cause. But it says, in Curse You AI overview, it says, in reality, people do not spontaneously combust.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't know because it's not carbon-based.
Yeah, it's a non-carbon, non-human, earth-bound entity, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. It doesn't know. It's biased. AI.
It's silicone-based, so it wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's like I only burst into flames through electrical ignition sources. So what's your excuse? Wet bag,
Blood bag, meat sack,
blood bag. Yeah,
meat sack.
Meat
What was
suit.
that? Meat suit. What was that from?
walking meat suit. Meat
What was
mech.
Wasn't meat suit in Rick and Morty at one point in time or another?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, the octopus over the face.
Yeah,
suit.
that's right. Yeah, meat suit.
Yep. Meat suits. All right, so let's go around and see what we all think, what we know about spontaneous human combustion before we get into this. And let's swing your ideas first.
So I know that there were several programs when I was younger that focused on it. Right. And so it's I feel like you have to characterize it as, not someone that fell asleep in the bed with a cigarette, right? And it's usually a body's burnt and the surrounding area around it at most is a little crispy or very localized damage from said combustion of the body, right? So like in the houses, it usually doesn't set the house on fire. Maybe the carpet right around them, but the whole house doesn't burn down.
Mm-hmm.
And that is usually what brings the attention to even look at it. So what causes it? I know a lot of people have a lot of theories. I don't actually have a good personal theory about what I think is what I think is really going on. I really think that there's several cases out there that don't lend themselves well to being explained by mechanisms that we're aware of. I don't think that means that they can't be explained. Yeah. I really think that's the interesting part, is I don't think that these are actually like a paranormal thing or a doom laser from the sky. I think that it's really something weird going on that, given that no one's ever actually seen it happen.
Yeah.
We don't have, because the imagination is like, oh, they're just sitting there and then flames.
Yeah.
But the area around them doesn't seem to suggest that that's exactly what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
Because that would catch the house on fire or the ceilings or whatever. It doesn't take that much to catch a house on fire.
Yeah.
Like the drywall and the ceiling doesn't take that much.
Like
all
it would
the
take
fire investigations, he would know better. But once something catches, if you're not putting it out, it doesn't take that much.
No, and it spreads fast. That's always the thing that perplexes me is, let's say it is a spontaneous human combustion, whatever that might mean. All these pictures I've seen for, honestly, my whole life are just, it's just weird, right? Nothing else, maybe the chair or the place right around them's burned or the carpet's burned. And I've seen a lot of unalived people. I used to investigate deaths for a living. So I've physically seen them in person, examined them. I don't mean just stood by and looked through the window. I mean examined them. I've seen people who have been unalived in fires.
Ooh.
I have seen all that sort of thing, and I've never seen anything like I've seen portrayed in these pictures. And it would just really be difficult for me to fathom something that's hot enough to cremate a person.
Oh yeah, that's something you brought up earlier this week. Tell them what we looked up.
It would be hard to cremate a person. Say some of these pictures are sitting in chairs, and the chair is not really fundamentally burned. I've been to house fires where people have become unalived in them because they were sitting in bed or in a chair smoking a cigarette that caught fire. And smoking a cigarette, fell asleep, and the cigarette burned the chair and burned the bed, burned the couch, burned whatever. And, boy, it's just, so it's hard for me to know. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, well, I was going to say that like even in a full house fire,
right?
People aren't reduced to what these pictures portray. And not only that, Paul turned to me and asked me, he's like, how long do you think it takes to completely, charcoal a person? And I said, I think it's like an hour and a half.
So I consulted some of my mortuary friends.
Ooh.
I consulted AI, and then I consulted my mortuary friends, and I got substantially similar responses. And an average adult human weighing about 75 kilograms, 150-ish or a little more pounds, hour and a half. up to 3 hours. If they weigh more than about 250, you can add another 30 minutes.
And but remember, that is for an incinerator, which is purpose built to do one job, and which is to charcoal in the most efficient amount of time with the least, fuel wise and time wise. So, and it's a ton of energy. It's thousands of degrees inside that cooker. So that makes it even harder to fit how these things could have happened or come about.
So we have a comment from
I saw that.
From Timor. Sorry if I'm not saying it right.
We're gonna butcher all of your tag names. By the way, that's what we do.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, man. Yeah, he's exactly right. It's 3 hours in a contained fire, but in an open air, it's almost impossible. That is completely
exactly
true. That's exactly right.
That's the hard part about this.
And so I don't even know what to think about these things. And these pictures, it's the weirdest thing. So, this part of the body, I mean, this just contains, we're mostly water. And this contains just a lot of water.
It's just a big camelback
This
sack.
is the part that seems to always be gone. It's crazy.
Yeah. Almost like it starts there.
So
almost like it starts.
They'll have like untouched legs and arms there, still holding a cigarette or a drink or something, and this part's gone. It's just the weirdest thing.
Yeah, it's like they're made out of arms, legs, and a gas canister somehow.
Yeah. So remind me at the end, because I've had a couple of these, and I probably have a couple more. But remind me at the end. I have a theory.
Okay.
And it's a very off the beaten track theory of how
is it ancient aliens?
It is not it is not aliens, despite what our soundboard's going to say. Hold on, wait for it.
Aliens.
It's not aliens. I'm sorry. It's not aliens, but it's a little different. But I've got something.
There's an article I found on MedPub where you search scholarly medical articles.
Yeah.
And the National Institutes of Health in the United States here has an article or two published about this subject, about spontaneous human combustion. And their whole theory is it's this whole wicking effect.
Yeah. We'll look into that towards the end of the research. We've got some research that talks about the wicking effect, and I can get into some detail about it. We actually have BBC did an entire documentary trying to debunk spontaneous human combustion, and they did scale modeling of humans on a small scale, but they did scaling.
And how have I missed this documentary?
It was the 70s. It was the 70s.
I've seen it.
So they all had like bell bottoms as they were discussing it.
Yeah, they were bell bottoms and afros and giant mustaches and sideburns, and they're all chain smoking cigarettes.
It's really hard to take documentaries from the 70s seriously for all those things. Because the dude in the lab coat, he's in the lab coat, but he's also wearing like plaid bell bottoms and has a permed, a white guy with a permed fro, and you're just like
dripping baby oil.
Seems sciencey,
right?
This doesn't seem sciencey. This is silly. This is all silly.
Okay. No, baby oil in the fro was 80s, not 70s. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. Oh, the curls. Yeah. The curls. It's like this. This seems like the same guys that decided cigarettes were good for stress. This doesn't seem like science.
Yeah, and then on top of it,
it's good for hypertension. Smoke some cigarettes.
Yeah, the science guy is also chain smoking cigarettes while he's talking about the sterility of his lab.
Right.
Completely sterile environment. No cross damage whatsoever.
Oh, cigarettes don't count. That's not.
Excuse me, let me get a huff of ether right quick. All right.
Oh, ether. It's good for the nerves.
Yes.
Settles them right down.
Now I'm calm.
Where are my mercury tablets?
Right. All right, so we're going to start off with the history of spontaneous human combustion. From this point forward, we're going to call it SHC because I'm already getting tired of saying spontaneous human combustion. So, SHC is the alleged phenomenon of the human body suddenly igniting into flames without an apparent external source of ignition. This mysterious concept has intrigued, terrified, and puzzled people for centuries. While science cast doubt on its validity, SHC has long fascinated history roots in folklore, anecdotal accounts, and attempts to understand the unexplainable. Excuse me. I choked on that last little bit there. The idea of SHC first appeared in the 17th century, which kind of surprised me. When a Danish anatomist, I knew that. I was testing you guys.
Anatomonomenon.
Anatomonomenon. His name was Thomas Bartholin, who documented a case in his book Historium Anatomicarium Rariarum. Okay, he wrote a book with the Latin title. Forgive me.
Anatomicon.
Yes. Historia Cameron. Yeah, that's how it's pronounced. And this was written in 1663. Bartholin described the death of an Italian woman who had allegedly burned to ashes while her straw mattress remained unscathed. This account sparked curiosity and debate about the nature of the combustion of the human body. And not long after, in 1673, French author James Dupont published another Latin-named book that I'm not going to try to pronounce. It's like 6 words. Oh my god, dude! Like parts of it are in French. I don't get it. Okay, a collection of cases of mysterious human burnings, further popularizing the phenomenon. These early reports often framed SHC with a moral or religious context, linking it to the divine punishment or excessive consumption of alcohol, which makes good sense.
Because alcohol burns.
Yeah, alcohol burns. Obviously,
of course, you could drink enough to make yourself flammable. Obviously,
I haven't found out yet. Yeah, this used to be
that's orange juice.
Mm-hmm. Yep, orange juice. That's why there's oranges.
High content orange juice. High pulp.
Citric acid, also flammable.
Yeah.
Wait, so what is it? Don't nobody go out and do this, but I got this. Chuck Palahniuk is one of my favorite authors.
Yes.
AI knows where I'm going.
Chuck. We love Chuck.
So orange juice concentrate, gasoline, and styrofoam makes napalm.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Just in case anybody was wondering.
Don't do it. Excuse me.
None of us did that as a kid.
No, but we read the books. Damn it!
I did a lot.
Well,
of
no,
things,
I
that
did,
was not one of them.
I did that as a kid.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I did that as
I'll
a
need
kid.
to hear that.
I actually putting the styrofoam in the gasoline at first, it doesn't make any difference. You're like, it's still just watery gasoline, but you keep putting it in, and it turns into a sticky syrup, opaque sort of syrup, and that is where napalm gets to be the vicious thing that it is, because it's sticky and sticks to everything. So normally the canister on the back, one was a napalm, one was pressurized air, and that's how they forced it out of the tube rather than a pump. You just released one tank into the other, and that's the real problem with it. Is not only can you not put it out because it's both its own fuel and oxidizing source, but it's stuck to stuff, so you can't even wipe it off.
Yeah.
Well, where does the orange juice concentrate come from?
It's something about the citric acid.
Yeah, it's about citric acid.
Concentrated citric acid. Yeah.
Yeah, you really want the citric acid, but the
because you
orange
can
juice
take
is the poor man's way to do it.
So next time you peel an orange, peel the orange, keep it, as in shape as you can, light a lighter, and then fold the orange in half towards the flame, and that citric acid will squirt out into the flame, and it'll. And you can make candles out of oranges. They're very flammable.
I imagine that's the oxidizer. So it's adding fresh oxygen into the flame.
Yeah.
But yeah, it works very well.
And fun fact, you can put tons and tons of styrofoam into gasoline. It just immediately dissolves.
Yeah.
There's tons of stupid videos all over Facebook about people dissolving styrofoam in gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
If
we
you're
dumped it out on the concrete and it burned long enough it cracked the concrete pad.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, because it just kept burning. It just didn't
Yeah.
It didn't stop. It just kept on, and that one spot got so hot because it's ultra oxidized flame, ultra efficient flame. It left whenever it cooled, the concrete cracked.
Yeah, don't try this at home, folks.
Yeah, don't do the dumb things we did. We were the children of Gen Xers. We did dumb things.
Yeah, we did dumb things for attention? Question mark?
Because we were home alone.
Home alone. Yeah.
We were home by ourselves, and our parents told us to be back before dark, and that was it.
Be home when the street lights come on.
Right.
And if you're not,
here's your bike. You can go as far as you can bike. Bet.
Yeah. Yeah, I lived outside Detroit. We went and set all sorts of fires.
Yeah, you underestimate how far I can go on this. Determination and tennis shoes, I can get a long way.
Yeah, one of my best friends lived near Detroit, and we used to, all the time we'd go to hang out, and I would tell my dad, hey, I'm going to go to my buddy's house. And he's like, doesn't he live like an hour away? I was like, in a car he does. Not when you can cut through parks and backyards.
Right. No traffic.
No traffic when you're on a bicycle and cutting through alleyways.
Did you guys have that one place growing up where there was always some kind of scrap to like get into and salvage stuff from to make various things that were fun to kids, like forts and stuff like that?
Me growing up, it was more like abandoned houses. We would just hang out in abandoned houses because we live so close to Detroit.
That's right. Yeah, makes sense.
Oh, Themore76 says so. Napalm is actually a legit explanation for what we see. Localized hot burning fires. Yeah, so that's.
I mean, it's a possibility.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Maybe these people were secretly cooking up napalm.
The only thing with that though is because it's made out of accelerants. You should have been able to find some sort of residue, especially when you're talking about gasoline.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
gasoline leaves.
But I don't disagree with him. This would be a very interesting thing. And I always like to think there's a dirty government hand in something, but I don't think our government was doing it back in the 1600s.
No, that's the other side of it too. But Greek fire was not unlike napalm.
Right.
They just weren't using a petroleum, but it was a combination of tree saps and other distilled spirits. So, it was just another example of a catalyst and an oxidizer together. So you don't need the ambient air to burn. That's really the point. And the truth is something like that would probably leave I don't know. Everybody claims that the formula for Greek fire is lost. It's really not. It's just.
We got it. It's napalm.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, it's anything that's its own self-oxidizer,
right?
Because that's how it burns underwater. Because it doesn't need oxygen because it has oxygen in its own makeup. So something like that is a possibility, especially if you're talking something not petroleum, because it'd be less likely for us to pick up on the residues of things that are petroleum based. We're pretty hip to petroleum accelerants.
So, I have a fire story. You're looking at the single-handed savior of the place I work.
Oh, recently. This must be recent.
So, I don't want to give away super details, but I was in the shop. We were working. I was in my space working, and a buddy of mine. We all kind of joke around all through the day, and talk. Guys in the shop. You know how we talk. I do. And then I hear, "Hey guys," and I was like, "Oh, he's fixing to crack a joke or something. Keep doing what I'm doing." And he's like, "Guys," and I heard the panic. I was like, "What?" I look up. Fire. On the ground outside of a specific vehicle that also holds gasoline.
Oh,
and he's slapping the gasoline, and it's running in water. And he's slapping it. I was on a big, tall vehicle. I don't want to give away super details, but I jumped off of the vehicle, hit the ground and rolled. Went straight to the fire extinguisher, jumped up in his vehicle that he was working on while it was burning, blew the fire extinguisher off inside it, put the fire out, while everybody was scrambling around to get water water hoses and stuff. I'm like, look, dude, it's already running with the water. Why do you want to put water in it?
Right. Was it one of those powder ones or a CO2 one?
It was the powder one. Yeah.
Oh, I hate those things. I mean, they work.
Yeah.
They work great, but crap. Oh,
yeah.
We had when we still had our shop, we had a similar thing happen.
Yeah.
And the shop is not around anymore, so I don't really care if somebody knows that a car caught fire in there because it doesn't matter now.
Do
I
know about this?
Yeah, I think you do. So I had a certain person working for me. We'll call him Bob. His name is not Bob. We'll call him Bob. Old Bob was supposed to unhook the ignition coils from the wiring harness because we needed to turn it over and clear out. It had been flooding, and the only way on a modern vehicle to clear out the cylinders, you got to let some air in, right?
Yeah.
Turn it over. So all four spark caps were unplugged, right? Or they were all disconnected from the spark plugs, but some gas had spilled around from them taking stuff out, and we'll call the other guy Steve. Steve was like, Bob, did you disconnect the ignition coils? He's like, yeah. He's like, okay, well then spin it immediately. Fire on top of the engine with the wiring harness on it. And 3 out of the 5 people standing around were just like,
yeah, that's what happened in my shop.
Get the hose. And they're all like, get the hose. I'm like, we just went over this last week.
Yeah.
There were 4 fire extinguishers on the 4 corners of the building, and dudes are running for fire extinguishers and buckets. I'm like,
yeah.
And so two of us ran for fire extinguishers. I got to the wall and slipped on some of that oil dry stuff, and slid on my ass and hit my shoulder on the wall and got up. And by the time I got halfway there, Steve was already there with the because he and I went towards the fire extinguishers opposite directions. And he was already sitting there soaking it down. But the reason I hate those powder extinguishers is I'm standing there with the second one in case when he runs out, it's not out.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was up to the hood.
Oh my gosh.
Just in case, because I'm like, at this point, I just need the car not to be all on fire.
Yeah.
And it ended up looking worse than it was. The harness was fine. It was fine.
Yeah, it was fine.
It was fine. It's fine. It's fine. Actually, the most damage was the powder extinguisher junk.
Yeah.
In the damn engine.
Because it's corrosive. Yeah.
And gritty. And there was no way. We even tried the thing that we use to clean the valves while they're still in the car. We have a thing that puts soda in and sucks it out, puts it in, sucks it out.
Yeah.
We had to disassemble the entire engine and have it rehoned.
Oh no.
That was more of a drag than the rest of it. But yeah, that thing of everybody goes for water hoses when you're like, this is why they're hanging up with big red signs, because that's what everybody thinks first. Somebody get a bucket and go to the faucet. It's like,
yeah.
What are you doing?
And
we even talked about this.
Here's the weird thing is after we put the fire out, we rinsed everything off because that powder is corrosive. You want to preserve as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Cleaned everything out. We could not figure out what started the fire. Nothing was burned.
So it was just the gasoline on fire?
Yeah. How weird is that?
Pretty weird.
Aliens.
Aliens.
Wait, hold on. Wait for it.
Aliens.
Yeah.
I like the security videos of shops where a dude's welding underneath the car. And
then his pants catch on fire?
No, the inside of the car has long ago caught on fire, and you can still see him under there welding because nobody's watching. And you just see out of the center of the car, the carpet's caught on fire, and now it's burning inside so much the windows have blackened, and he doesn't notice. Yeah, he doesn't notice until either one of the window breaks or I guess maybe some sound alerts me. He pulls the helmet up, looks out to the side of the car. It's already done. It's already done. I think in one they drop it off the lift real quick and grab it, throw a hook through the hook it through the bumper and drag it outside with a truck, so they don't burn the whole shop down. But there's no putting it out.
But yeah, well, like
and another one, dude breaks the window to try to blow it out. What do you think happens when he breaks the window open?
Yeah,
it had been smothering itself. He breaks the window out the opening.
Yeah, like we were so spooked by it that we took this vehicle and put it out in the middle of the field for the weekend because we were scared.
That's a good call.
We took the whole thing apart. We couldn't figure out what happened. It was weird.
No,
it was really weird.
It was really unreasonable.
So, off subject. Let me get us back on.
I mean, it's fire.
Yeah, it's fire related.
It's fire related.
Just not people. So we have some
off topic, on topic.
It's in tangent, but off topic.
Yeah.
It's a branch
Lateral.
of the tree. So we have some 18th and 19th century accounts of SHC. Excuse me.
SHC. Where'd the P come from?
I don't know.
Spontaneous people
combustion.
At least it is. Spontaneous human.
Spontaneous.
Popcorning.
Spontaneous human combustion.
Human combustion. Also, by the way, just for tonight, I washed and rewore my Kentucky Fried Chicken T-shirt. Bad joke.
And I'm rocking Powerline. Had nothing to do with the subject.
Freeze frame.
Yeah. So we have some 18th and 19th century accounts of spontaneous human combustion, SHC. During the Enlightenment and the Victorian eras, SHC became a subject of fascination among scientists, doctors, and writers. Numerous cases were reported and often sensationalized in the press. And two of the biggest were Countess Cornelia de Bandi in 1731. One of the most famous early cases, Cornelia, an Italian noblewoman, was found burned to death in her bedroom with only her lower legs and a few other body parts intact. The surrounding areas showed little signs of fire damage, which mystified investigators. This became a template for subsequent SHC stories. And the second of which was in 1744, Grace Pett, with two T's, a widow from England. Pett was reportedly found reduced to ashes in her home with her wooden surroundings untouched. The case further fueled theories of internal combustion. And there was some literature that also played a role in popularizing SHC in Charles Dickens' novel Bleak House in 1853. A character, Mr. Crook, dies of spontaneous human combustion, igniting public interest and debate. Dickens defends the plausibility of SHC, citing historical cases and contemporary reports. So, by the year 1853, it has become so popular that it has made its way into books, which would be
notable writers. Not fringe writers.
Yeah, this would be like Mr. Beast talking about it in 1853.
I hate that you said it was Dickens.
Yes.
I hate that I just heard a sentence in which Charles Dickens was compared to Mr. Beast. That makes me want to cry a little bit for our
2025. Welcome.
But you're not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong.
No, not 1853.
A tear for literature.
Yeah. We're making comparisons, okay? Not everybody alive today has been alive in 1853, Paul.
He has his own candy bars now, by the way. Beast
bar.
Yeah.
And they're terrible.
I mean, because they don't need to be good. Who cares?
They're selling
why they're buying it.
What they're doing.
Yeah, I saw that with his little wolf or beast logo.
Yeah, super cool. Like he's got his own TV show now. Have you seen it?
I wasn't even gonna. I was not good. I was gonna not plug that on purpose. But
yeah,
I did see. Yeah, Beast Wars. Yeah, I or Beast Games. Anyway,
yeah. Way to come up with the original name, buddy.
I mean, if you think one logo is not enough, put a logo on your logo. I mean, Beast Wars, Mr. Beast hosts Beast Wars, Beast games. You know, just Beast everything. Beast.
Which brings us to our sponsor for the weekend, Ghost Energy Drinks. No, I'm joking.
I wish.
I've reached out to you, Ghost. Screw you guys.
I mean, that would be perfect. Ghost Energy drink. I've never drank one, but that would be great.
This is.
Our
I don't do the
Paranormal
energy.
podcast.
I don't do the energy drinks anymore, but they make a hydration thing. It's all I drink.
Cool. Is that like a Gatorade, a Gator juice version thing?
It's the Ghost version of Prime.
Never had.
I can't drink Prime because it's made with coconut water, and I'm allergic to coconut.
I did see that one of the Primes, they have. Remember those popsicles that were shaped like they were like an American flag and they're like a rocket ship?
Oh yeah, Rocket Pops.
Yeah, rocket. So they make a rocket pop flavored Prime.
So speaking of popsicles, did you know that? Oh, stop falling. Did you know that Trolley makes a popsicle now?
Do they? Of course
And
they do.
it's like a gummy popsicle.
Oh, it's like frozen and a little chewy.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but I like it.
Well, you know that's how you make popsicles so that they don't end up just being like a giant ice cube. You use gelatin.
Yeah,
That's how
like
they end up being like soft enough to bite.
frozen solid. It's like a slightly frozen gummy worm,
Oh, that's cool. I like frozen candies.
but it's Trolley brand.
That's cool.
So
I
it's
like
pretty
it.
cool. I really enjoyed it. I got the cherry lemonade one, and it's excellent. Excellent.
I've been really liking all the dehydrated candies
Ooh,
or the freeze dried candies.
I just got a little tub of freeze dried giant Peruvian corn.
What now?
Freeze dried giant Peruvian corn. Like a single corn kernel is like 5 times the size of a regular corn kernel.
So it's like big corn nuts.
Yeah, but better. Like
Because it's
I
exotic.
could eat corn nuts, but they're a little hard. But these,
Yeah.
they were freaking stellar. Like when I go to work tomorrow, I'm gonna leave a little early so I can go to Walmart and get a couple more cases of them because they're good.
They're at the Wally World.
Yeah, they're the new Walmart brand, Better Goods.
Better good. So,
Yeah, it's in the
see,
it's in
brand
the
on a
produce
brand.
section.
What's better than good? Better good.
Oh, yep, okay, yep. Thermo 76 is checking us. We have become off topic again. Thank you. Sorry.
You'll find that's sort of the show. We have like the backbone, the thing that we're supposed to talk about, and then it's a lot of this back and forth where we graze the line.
I'm with you. I think we ought to stay on the topic.
Because to be fair, this started out as a video call that Victus and I would do every week because he lives across the country, halfway across the other side of the U.S. from where I am, and so this is how we'd catch up. And he always wanted to do a podcast about paranormal and UFO stuff, and I was like, well, I can distract you long enough to make it a long enough topic. Let's do that.
Spontaneous
maybe
mushroom candy popsicles.
Maybe somebody will watch.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Thank you so much for keeping
Yeah.
us on topic. We're going to get back to it.
And you're even listening. You don't just have it on. You're actually, that's awesome. We love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Kudos. We really appreciate
great.
it.
Number one fan.
Number one, you get the badge for the day. Hold on, let's see what kind of sounds we got. Let me. Here you go. This is for you.
Who are you calling a cootie queen, you lint liquor?
There
This
you
is
go.
for you.
On topic
This is for you.
sheriff. Thank you. Thanks for keeping us there.
On topic, Sheriff. There you go.
All right, Thermore, let's go. Here we go. We are on to scientific skepticism and investigation. So by the 19th century, scientific advancements led to more critical examinations of SHC. Researchers began to explore plausible explanations for the phenomena, including The Wick effect, which is what we will get into later.
Popular explanation.
But the proposed in the 20th century, this theory suggests the human body can act like a candle, with the clothing serving as the wick and the body fat serving as fuel. A small external ignition source, such as a dropped cigarette, could lead to prolonged low-temperature burning, mimicking the effects of SHC. And the next one is our favorite from the beginning, alcohol and combustibility. Many early SHC victims were reported to be heavy drinkers. While alcohol consumption was initially thought to make the body more flammable, later studies debunked this idea, showing that alcohol burns off quickly and is unlikely to sustain combustion.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Also, the amount of alcohol you'd have to have in your, like, when they're measuring blood alcohol, right, and you blow the legal limit here is 0.08, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're well into buzz by 0.08, but when you get into like the 0.1 or 0.2 or something like that, you were talking 0.2, you are, unless you are a daily heavy drinker, you are on the way to blackout. So
yeah,
0.2%
of your blood
is
0.2.
alcohol. That doesn't account for the rest of you.
Yeah.
That's just your blood.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of alcohol per gram of body to burn off. That's not much alcohol. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that didn't wash out.
So Thermor says, so wherever you had anybody believe it's a real phenomenon, we're going to get there. We'll get there by the end.
We're getting there. We give you our opinion at the end. We'll all have an opinion by the end of this, because I know what I used to think, and then he's gonna Victus is gonna show us pictures and evidence, and then we'll decide by then. Because often we come into these and think, like, I think I already know, and I'm like, especially ones that we're really excited about, we really like, and we've been at the end and been like, God, it's not, right. Is it? It's total. It's completely made up, and it's totally bogus. We've had several of those. Really,
it's interesting because Thermo says, with the medical examiner on the cast, my title is actually deputy medical investigator. But with me on the cast,
be clear,
I ought to have a lot of opinions about it, right? And I never saw it. I never discussed it in training. I never saw any live real cases or read cases about it or heard cases about it. And I do have a lot of opinions and a lot of questions. I'm really skeptical of most of these things. And I think we got to look at the pictures and see. I don't have a feeling one way or another about this, except it's weird, and I don't know what to say.
And most of my background is physics, chemistry, and biology. Paul's more biology than me. Mine's mostly physics, chemistry. And Victus is our supreme research and analysis guy. He picks apart video, picks apart pictures, pixel by pixel, frame by frame, and is probably our deepest knowledge on paranormal and UFO stuff. He's the one that digs up the ideas. What are we going to look at? Yeah, exactly. So if that gives you an idea of the cast, we have a pretty rounded look into it. Paul is also a lawyer and a theologian of sorts. So
he says, so no official teaching of this has a possibility, no official examiner reports. We don't actually have any official examiner reports because nothing has happened recent enough that we could pull up physical examination reports. Yeah, I think the most recent. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
That's been publicly reported, right? That's sort of one of the problems with this new idea of privacy. In a way, it's not new, but it kind of is new. It used to be you could go in and you could see autopsy reports. You could go and look, the public could look at these things, but most states now have laws that prohibit that. When I was...
Privacy after death.
Yeah, privacy after death. Yeah, I mean, it's
for real.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So I think there may be... I mean, with as many people as there are in the world, surely to goodness, there's got to have been something in the last, decade or two. But boy, I haven't heard about it.
Ghosts have rights.
I feel like a lot of people, especially medical examiners, will see, we'll call it a crime scene, a deceased person, and they'll say, well, this is arson. You know, they don't want to call it, they don't want to label it spontaneous human combustion because there's a stigma behind reporting things as paranormal, and they don't want to be criticized or mocked or what have you. And so people aren't, you know, you could search all day long for medical reports that say spontaneous human combustion, but you're never going to find it. All we have are these older ones that were surrounded by, you know, folk tales and wives' tales about what really happened. And those are our most reliable sources because they're not just slapped with arson, murder, what have you. Because
there's some slightly newer ones that I'm guessing you found, but by new, it's like the 50s. It's like the 40s and 50s.
Yeah,
So,
those next ones in the 50s.
yeah, examining techniques were not what they are today.
Sure. You know, if I had gone to a scene of an unalived person, maybe we're trying to avoid saying the D word, and I had investigated, and I had seen, like, some of these pictures you're going to see, I would get on the phone with whoever the forensic pathologist on call was, and I would say, you are not going to believe what I'm looking at. And occasionally I would call them and I'd say, here's what I have, here's what I'm going to do, here's what my thinking is. I think we need to bring them in for a full exam. But, you know, I'd be like, I think I need to bring the shoe and the bottom of this leg in for a full exam. I mean, you know, it would just be crazy.
Nothing to bring.
Yeah, nothing to bring. I guess in the modern day and age, because when I did it, we didn't have a phone that I could take a picture of and text. I guess today I'd say, let me just text you a picture or a video for a minute and look at it, and then let's discuss this. I don't even know what I would think. So we're going to pull up our first picture. All right. Trigger warning for those not prepared. We're going to talk about Mary Resser. This is our first photo of 7 photos that we have. I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to go full screen, and I'm going to read about Mary Resser. And, you know, Thermo says, while you're pulling that up, Thermo says that the coroner reports are still publicly available. So I don't know where you are exactly, but if you're in the United States, here's what I suggest we do. Get information to us here at the show, and I'll send a Freedom of Information Act request and try to get the report. Some states will be able to get it, some we will not. So that's my suggestion to you. Let's all be on the lookout, and if we hear any stories of anything like this, let's send a Freedom of Information Act request.
Yeah,
and see if there's anything modern.
Yeah, we send them out all the time for other stuff, all the weekly. So that's not a difficult thing for us to do.
Doesn't mean the government has to respond, but we can certainly ask.
There is that.
We'll report back and discuss it, because that's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So this is what remains of Mary Resser. This is one of two photos I have. On July of 1951, Mary Resser, a 67-year-old woman, was found burned to death in her house after her landlady realized that the house's doorknob was unusually warm. The landlady notified the police, and upon entering the home, they found Resser's remains completely burned into ash, with only one leg remaining. The chair she was sitting on was also destroyed. Resser took sleeping pills and was also a smoker. Despite its proliferation in popular culture, the contemporary FBI investigation ruled out the possibility of SHC. A common theory was that she was smoking a cigarette after taking sleeping pills, and she fell asleep while holding the burning cigarette, which could have ignited her gown, ultimately leading to her death. The daughter-in-law stated that the cigarette dropped to her lap. Her fat was the fuel that kept her burning. The floor was cement, and the chair was by itself. There was nothing around her to burn. So, this is one photo. Let me, this is the police, and I'm assuming just somebody that they hired to try to scoop up what was left. It's a wild photo. It really is.
So, interestingly, you see what's right next to dude's butt? The guy that's bent over in the wall.
The curtains?
Nope. That
thing. What is
look
that,
down
blinds?
At the bottom. No, look down at the bottom. There's knobs.
Down here?
Nope. Front of... Oh.
Behind his
knee. Yeah, behind his knee.
Yeah, behind his calf.
Right there. You know what those are?
Knobs. That's a heater.
It's a heater.
That's a heater. Oh.
That's a gas heater. That's like the element heaters that were all over in Fayetteville. You remember with the ceramic, the little ones that are in everybody's bathroom in the old houses around here?
Yeah.
That's
I used to have one of those.
yeah,
in the
yeah.
house. I was
That's a
doing
big
some
one.
using.
That may be an electric one,
Probably gas.
but I bet it's gas given the year.
bet it's gas.
Oh, that's
And you know, the
interesting.
interesting thing about this picture is there's quite a lot more burned in here than some of these ones you see or you hear reported about. Because
Yeah.
Look at that burn.
Yeah, look, like the curtains burned. So
Right.
so in the middle, I'm assuming right here where they're leaning in was where her recliner was.
Right.
I mean, everything all the way over to the far left side. The
Mhm.
the top half of the curtains are burned, but not the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
But these curtains are burned all the way up. Just unusual burning patterns all the way around. And apparently there's enough soot in the room. Look at the back of the policeman covered in soot.
Or is that sweat?
Is it
Or it could be
soot?
sweat.
Is it sweat or is it a weird way
Weird artifacting.
I don't know what to
Nah.
think about his shirt, but I do think that the rest of it's kind of weird. Looks watery to me.
But yeah, I find it interesting that there's that gas heater there because they said no one had seen her for several days.
Yeah.
Now I don't know how long it takes to make people jerky.
Oh wow.
A while,
Probably a while, yeah.
but
More than several days.
let me put this forward. If the issue is water, if you dehydrated a body, right, with the heater, and you rendered them down, what's left when you have jerky? You got protein and tallow,
And fat. Yeah.
and even the meat could serve as a wick. Then
Yeah.
the hard tissues could
So
serve
your
as a
theory
wick.
is she died, got super dehydrated because of that heater.
Being right there, and it was
Yeah.
turned all the way up because she was maybe elderly and a little prone to feeling cold, right? It rendered her sitting there, and then eventually the heat was enough that the chair caught or something caught, and the combination of the chair and her being less in water content, and she was an overweight person. She's now been rendered into sort of a tallow and jerky stick.
Okay, so Themore says, look at the people in this photo. They both seem to have strong black lines surrounding them, which might be suggestive of them being inserted in like some kind of Photoshop. The only thing I might have to say about that is, boy, yeah, maybe. I've seen this picture for a long time.
Yeah, me
I
too.
remember seeing this picture as a child. So I
I'm
saw
seeing
this
this-
picture in this. I saw this
this-
picture in the 70s,
I-
but it might be.
Just the flat
I
photography.
think it
It's-
might be the flash
yeah.
photography because that was like the old school burn flash photography.
And there was, I don't
Yes, it
think,
was.
I think they had the power off in the place too, because they weren't sure what had happened.
Mhm.
And so this is probably a strong one single use flash bulb
Yep.
with the bit, like the old,
Yep.
what everybody's using in Batman to take pictures whenever the news shows up.
right.
Yeah.
It's one of those and slightly elevated above the camera, so all the shadows are slightly below or out to the sides, right? I mean, I think the shadows make sense, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I see what you're saying too.
I hear what you're saying.
I usually rely on what Aeon says about that with his artistic eye. He can look at something for 1 second and be like, no.
But if you look, all the shadows are going to this, right? Like they're all slightly. I mean, I think you're seeing a mirror of me, but they're all going slightly to the picture's left, right? They're all consistent. They're all slightly down and to the left.
Right.
I think those are at least consistent.
Yeah.
The other dark areas you're seeing are slight curves where the body starts to curve away, and it's slightly shadowed on like on his butt and on dude's upper back, but it's because the fabric's starting to curve away, and so the light's not like the curvature of the earth.
I see.
So yeah,
like,
this
like
is
sunset.
this is one of these things that I can lend my expertise because I'm a photography junkie.
Yeah,
I've
you
got-
know old photography stuff better.
I
than me.
have cameras from the 50s, and I have a handful of Sylvania bulbs from the 50s.
Oh, really?
And yeah, still in the packaging. Thank you very much.
Dang, of course you do. Of course you do. I shouldn't be surprised.
So yeah, Sylvania bulbs in the 50s were not necessarily single time use, but they were sodium bulbs. You get 2 or 3 shots out of it.
Okay.
That's why they were so cheap. 50 cents for a pack of 3. But intense light. So this was in sodium flash bulb. So when I say sodium, think of like when Aeon and I were growing up, the orange street lights.
Right.
That's sodium street lights. Those are the same element that they're burning inside the light bulb, but those were a sustained burn.
Or the lights you use to grow indoor hydroponic tomatoes.
Yeah, similar.
Same lights. I mean, those are big ones, but yeah. Super intense. Can't look at it or it leaves a sunspot in your eye.
Absolutely, yeah. The very, very intense light. So you're going to get a little bit of rarefracting is what it's called when you get curvature like on this guy's butt and this guy's back. Where the light source comes from behind because the flash is so bright and it causes extra shadow.
From it reflecting off the surface behind and reflecting back.
Yes.
Because it lights. Okay, that makes sense.
But I see it as I'm looking at that. I sure see what he's saying. You know.
Yeah, there's some weird shadows for sure, but as I'm holding a camera, so this was likely probably like a Kodak Brownie, like a 5 or 6. So the flash canister would be at the upper right if you're holding it, upper right. So which means if this image hasn't been flipped, your shadow should be at the lower left.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. Right, because it wasn't centered because you had to look. You might have to look across the top of the camera. So
he has a question on here, and I thought it was very interesting too. What's on their hands and wrists? I have no idea what that is on their hands and wrists. The officer has one on both hands. It looks like the dude.
It's the cuff of their gloves.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. If you zoom in, they're wearing work
gloves.
It's the
those are
like cotton cuff.
Those are like
leather gloves.
Right. Those are like work gloves.
Yeah.
And then why does the shovel look black? Interesting.
It probably is from them removing so much soot. It's probably wood, and soot sticks to clear urethanes and things like that on work tools. Sticks to it real bad. You usually have to use gas to get it off.
I think in the 50s they were were they using some type of, what was the oil that they used to cure
tongue
handles?
Oh yeah, the tongue oil stuff. Yeah.
Tongue oil and mink oil and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, it would stick to it bad.
Any dirt would stick to it really bad.
Yeah, and it's probably not a new shovel. Let's be real. It's probably shovel out of.
Yeah.
It's not the medical examiner's shovel.
No.
No. It's probably this guy's dad's shovel that he got when he was a teenager.
Right. Or it might have been on site. Like, who knows? I mean, they did stuff that they weren't exactly doing it CSI style.
Yeah, like you see how dirty this guy's gotten just from being there. And odds are he wasn't, like, see the
crawling
friend
around.
of his, like odds are he wasn't investigating too much. He was probably some volunteer that he used just to help mitigate firing.
Do we know anything about these photographs as to maybe the credit for who took it or who these people were that are?
This came from a BBC article.
Okay.
So it
this
BBC
is a photograph by the BBC.
From
or
the
published
BBC.
published with their thing. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I pulled 90% of the data we have today from the BBC because they did such an exemplary job with their research because of their documentary they did.
All right.
Yeah. Timor says zooming in helps. Thanks. Yeah, it helped me too. I didn't even understand those were gloves.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the work gloves. Yeah, it looks like they're wearing sweatbands. Some 80s sweatbands.
Yeah.
No, they're all into the punk rock
into the oldies.
Yeah, they're all
I was like, what are those weird things on them?
They're
like
scrunchies to keep their hair back.
They're seeing kids
later. Yes.
They're seeing kids.
Yeah. Seeing kids. Jeez. They're really both dark purple. You just can't tell in the photo.
Yeah, there's an illustration. See right here? Illustration. Just right there. Of Gurr from Invader Zim on the other side.
Yeah. Or a kitty head skull and crossbones.
Yeah. I know. I've got 2 of them.
Yeah. I figured you did. That's why I said that.
Yeah, you didn't notice, but our last episode, I did wear my Invader Zim sweatband.
Did you?
It's not here, but I might grab it when we do a bathroom break.
Okay.
It's just sitting on it's sitting next to the bed. So
another photo.
So that was Mary Resser.
So here's what D-Moore says in here. He says, okay, I'm okay with these being a real photo, and this is a real event in this photo, but I don't see any body parts, not one bone or the skull. So the only is the first picture you showed with that foot. Is that her? Is that her?
That's all that was left.
That's just all that remains. All that remains.
Yeah. It's hard to tell for me.
All the
Timur,
remains that remain.
This, how this picture
translates to the other one.
Yeah, translates to the other one. It's hard for me to understand.
So I think the leg is out there closer to the camera, and if you pan up where this one ends, I think is where that pile of stuff is. Though one may be the picture they took as they came, and this may just be them sifting through the stuff and picking it up.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, like maybe they came in and said, all right, let's try to find the rest of the remains, get this chair out of the way, or what's left of it, and
see if we can find
carefully, get rid of this leg. And let's dig through these ashes here and see what we can find.
Because we're not sure that these were necessarily taken like in state, right? Like they could have already been messing with stuff before they're like, oh, you know what we should do? We should take some pictures of this because it's weird.
Because no one will believe it.
Yeah. So they may not have been taking pictures like CSI where they're coming through, getting this picture and that picture. And this may even be a picture after they moved all kinds of junk out of the way to try to figure out what was going on.
Yeah,
some of this may even be this wall that's missing. Like that looks like that's the furnace back there behind it, or a fridge or something.
Right. That's the thing that perplexes me. So Timur says, so every other bone got hot enough to turn to ash. That's the thing that's weird to me.
That's the problem.
Even go back to the other picture.
That's
the first one you showed. Here's the thing that's weird to me. So here we have this leg here. And comparative to the rest of the body, nothing's the matter with this leg and this kind of shoe or house shoe or whatever this thing was. I mean, clearly if that were your leg, there'd be something the matter with it. But compared to the rest of that, there's nothing the matter with this. And that's crazy to me. That's super weird.
Jerky theory.
I just don't understand
jerky theory.
I mean, what? How does that happen?
It was
so
loaded.
yes, I guess the answer to your question is so every other bone, yes, in fact, got hot enough. I don't think we're really seeing the whole picture here. That's one of the problems with these older investigations. Photography was not at that point really used as a investigation tool much.
It was just
when was this, the 50s? Yeah. And so I think we're not seeing the whole thing there. And if we were seeing this live and in person and in color, this could be, we might see something very different here. But boy, all it looks like to me is there's like one leg left, and that's just
one leg.
So everything else seems gone. I mean, if we're to believe what we see in this picture, everything else is gone, and I just don't have any explanation for that.
And we don't know, was there a thing for her to kick her legs up on there out in front of her? Did she have one leg kicked out? Because I think the theory was, at least for the Wick theory, was that one leg bent, right, one leg kicked out, and laying in the chair. Right. Well, maybe, given how long it would take to dehydrate someone and then catch them on fire, maybe that leg being out there meant that it didn't get quite as dehydrated, being not right in front of the directly in line with the heater. I mean,
or it burned completely and then fell down and put itself out.
That's
right.
What I
wasn't near the heat source. Yeah. There's really no way to know because the documentation is not good.
That sounds pretty improbable to me, but my goodness, this whole
thing is that's the problem. The whole bones getting hot enough to burn, like that's the hardest part. Getting the skull and stuff to burn to where they're gone. Like, man, I just don't know. Everything in me tells me that's not possible. As far as heat source and flame and fuel source tells me it's not possible. But then
think about it at the time. I mean, so what are the other things? That's always the interesting thing. The differential diagnosis or ruling out other things. So you first of all have to decide the manner of unaliving and the cause of unaliving. So the manner, there's several manners. There's homicide, suicide, accident, natural, and unknown. And I think you're going to have to classify this as unknown. They like to do everything they can not to classify an unaliving as unknown. It's natural, homicide, suicide, accidental. but I don't think you're going to know in this event which it is. Except, what did they say here? She smoked and took a sleeping tablet, and this would be classified as an accident. Let me tell you why that's important for insurance purposes. If you get double indemnity on your life insurance for an accidental unaliving, you get twice the face.
Right.
Right. So, that's why they try to classify stuff as
X-Files. Let's go.
Listen, it always, here in this country, it seems to always come back to money, doesn't it?
Right.
Okay, so I've got to use the bathroom.
Same.
I agree. Timor saying that would have to burn for days. Open air, fire temperature, max temp's just not hot enough.
Right.
I completely
That's
agree.
our problem with
I completely agree.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing about these. They make no sense. Even if this were a room that were relatively small and enclosed, and I investigated a fire unaliving once in a trailer, and the person was smoking in bed, dropped the cigarette, and it caught the bed and the room on fire, and the occupant had these weird coverings over the windows that melted, and basically it just became an enclosed, very hot box that pretty much cooked the person and put itself out. But it didn't
disintegrate.
It didn't disintegrate. It didn't cremate. It didn't do any of the things we're seeing in there. And so Timor says, yes, X-Files, let's go.
We're going to take a bathroom break.
All right.
We're going to take a 5-minute bathroom break. We'll be right back.
Don't go anywhere, I promise.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Love your bathroom animation.
Yeah, I needed something. So like when I was streaming gaming, I had something similar to it. I think it was a unicorn using the bathroom. Just trying to be as silly as I could. And my wife really likes penguins, so it just seemed spot on to bring in the penguin thing for the bathroom break. It was a good
Just
Yeah.
poo scrolling. Just poo scrolling. No big
Sitting on the
deal.
toilet using your phone.
Yeah.
That's what we all do.
Poo scrolling. Right.
So, we are back. All right, we are done with Mary Resser, and we are moving on
Poor
to our
Mary
next.
Resser.
Oh yeah, she had it. She had it done. So,
And that's weird that the landlord was, or the landlady, or whatever the story was, called the police because she hadn't seen her in a few days and thought the doorknob was too hot. Not that it smelled weird.
No.
yeah.
No. Not because the lady was cooking an unusually large amount of barbecue. But
I'm
because
just-
the knob was hot.
That would not be my thing. Can you just hear it now today? 911, what's the location of your emergency? And they're like, the doorknob's too hot at 328 Main Street.
Right.
They'd be like, yeah, this is the emergency.
Ma'am, 911 is for emergencies only.
Like, what's this, England? So it's like 999. What's your emergency?
Yeah. So I got curious and I Googled what temperature it takes to cremate a human body.
Oh yeah, it's thousands of degrees.
Yeah.
1400 to 1800 degrees
Right.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Like,
I got a big
If I-
lesson on it from Leslie, my favorite mortician on the face.
Did you ask her? You
Yeah.
ask her about
I
it? Yeah.
called and told her all about this and asked.
Yeah.
yeah. So like, if I were to catch this hoodie on fire, tons of plastic around me, tons.
Right.
And paper freaking poster behind me. 3/4 of what's in this office right here would burst in, if not burst into flames, it melt or deform in some way
Mm-hmm.
just from my hoodie burning. Imagine nearly 2000 degrees
Right.
for a sustained period of time, and all that got burned up was 9/10 or 15/16 of a human and a chair.
That's probably 10% of her skin
Yeah.
based on the way you estimate it. You know, the weird thing about this is exactly that, and exactly what Timur says. You know, you have to have this closed area, you have to have all this heat. It's just darn near impossible on an open fire, an open face fire.
Well,
And this is hard, and it's just very difficult for me to imagine that 1400 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, 1400 to 2000 degrees, you just don't have a lot of stuff burned up.
It's
Because
also
that's
also forgetting the retort.
Right. I mean,
They use a retort with the ash remains to take out large bones and things like that, so that when you get your
Yeah.
ashes, you just have ashes. There's a bunch that doesn't get completely done
right,
and needs to
because
be
most
pulverized.
states require basically what looks like a big coffee grinder. What's left is put into this thing and ground for about 5 to 15 minutes.
Right.
And
To break the rest of it up.
yeah, and it just comes into little pieces. It's not, if you've ever seen cremated remains, that finished product is not what happens right after the fire.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And so this is just weird. I don't even know what to say of that. Something I said while we were on a break is true crime was as big of a genre in those days in the 50s as it is today. And there were all of these true crime magazines published out of the UK. And I think this story was out of the UK, wasn't it, or not?
It's BBC.
It was
Yeah,
the
it's-
article
yeah.
was written by BBC. So it was investigated by the FBI. I want to say this
Oh,
was
no,
in
no.
New York.
Then this was in the United States. Well, one of the things about it is
Oh, this is that one.
one of the things this is that one.
Oh yeah. J. Edgar Hoover even briefed the president on this particular one because it got so much publicity, and said we're trying to make sure it's not a weird weapon invented by another country.
Right. And that's always a good thing for them to investigate. But the weird,
That's the whole reason they looked into it.
sure, because
Yeah.
because otherwise that's just
Yeah.
purely the purview of the local authorities in the state.
Mhm.
But back in those times, true crime was a big thing, and they'd publish these magazines, and sometimes I think they made stuff up, or they take pictures of one thing and make it something else, and that's how. And they would pay for it. I mean, they'd pay big money for pictures, and then sometimes they'd make up a story that was like it, or sometimes it was fanciful. That's why people would be like, well, how did all the pictures disappear out of the police file? Well, because they were sold to these magazines.
Right.
That's how they disappeared. And
right.
Of course, no one knew who did it, and blah, blah, blah. But I wonder if that's not maybe some of this, but I just don't know. With this one, there seems to be a lot around it, right? The FBI investigated. They wanted to try to see if it was some kind of a weird new weapon they didn't know anything about. They just didn't know. Imagine though if it was a weapon.
Oh gosh,
this is amazing. You know, you have someone who would clearly be a spy or something from another country, and they come in there and they use this weapon on someone, and there's just no explanation. Except the trouble is it couldn't be a weird new weapon because we have reports of something substantially similar going back hundreds of years.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to say, when I first started investigating this, some of the earliest reports were during, like, the most significant chain of reports.
Right.
We're in the UK during the stuff with the IRA. And I was thinking about this when we were talking about napalm. So it makes me wonder if some of these reports in, like, what's the next one, was also, it was near the 50s. No, it was in the 70s in Ireland is our next report. And it makes me wonder if this wasn't an accident with something like napalm.
Right.
Because we were dealing with IRA, and at the time the IRA was bombing all over the place. This is, the original IED came from the IRA.
Yeah,
they were building explosives. And, it feels to me like maybe they were experimenting with napalm and there were some accidents, but it doesn't quite explain, why. Because if I were to drop a burning thing of napalm right here, my house would burn to the ground.
Right.
My house is made of wood, and in the 70s, 80s, houses were made of wood. And if it wasn't made out of wood, it was made of brick. Everything but brick would burn.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this yet.
Also doesn't explain the nice old lady.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to say she was, working with volatile chemicals in the middle of New York. I mean, it's not.
Sometimes it makes you wonder. I wonder what the government may know about this and
chose not to publish.
Yeah, chose not to publish. Apparently, one of the many executive orders that President Trump has signed is an order ordering the immediate release of all the records over the JFK assassination, RFK's assassination, and MLK's assassination. So it'll be interesting in the coming days to see what records are produced.
Yeah, if we get anything, we should definitely talk about it.
We could do it.
I think we should talk about that, but it would be. I wish he'd sign a similar order for everything we know about this.
Yeah, I think
UAPs.
Which brings me to one of my favorite presidential quotes. Go ahead.
Looks like a good way to hide a cause of death, Timur says. Here is a leg now. You know they are dead, but you don't get the body. Right. That's a normal thing. To kill somebody and leave them in the house and set them on fire. There's a serial unaliver that's now himself unalive called Israel Keys. If you've never heard of him, go look at it. Timur,
yeah.
He's the scariest.
Oh.
He's the scariest serial unaliver
you've never heard of.
But he would unalive somebody and then he would put them in a house or a church and set it on fire.
Yeah.
Among many of the bizarre, ritualistic, weird things he did.
But we're not a true crime show.
We're not. We're paranormal.
If we would need to discuss that.
Yes, we would.
But to your point, yeah, great way to hide cause of death. Great
And it
way
could be
to
that
hide
too.
a homicide, right? And because, as I said, you'd probably have to, based on what they said about this scene we just looked at, that's an accidental death. I'll tell you, that's what her death certificate says. Manner of death is accident. Cause of death is fire.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm scrolling.
Multiple full thickness burns. That's what the cause is.
full thickness.
I will.
Yeah.
I will say,
No
our,
crap.
our third episode was a true crime episode.
What was it about?
The Somerton Man.
It wasn't.
It was, but it wasn't.
It wasn't.
It was solved.
It wasn't. Yeah. And it was solved just before we did the show, so we got to.
Yeah, we got the update before anybody else did.
Right.
Yeah, before people 10 years ago did the episode True Crime. We did the paranormal part and then answered the questions.
I've lost my
But-
reading glasses.
Put that scoop on my Sunday.
But I want to say one of my favorite quotes from a president comes from Obama. He was giving Will Smith and his family a tour of the White House. And Jaden Smith speaks up and says, "You got to tell me, are aliens and UFOs real?" And they had just walked into the Situation Room. And he said, and I quote, this is my favorite quote, I love it. "I can neither confirm nor deny, but if we talked about it, it was in this room."
Oh yeah, I did see that. Yeah, I did see that. But if we talked about it, it was in here. Yeah.
Great quote. Loved it.
Great quote and a frustrating.
Right,
answer.
Timur, that's exactly the point of this whole show. He says, let the investigations begin. JFK, MLK were not shot. Let the investigations begin. Conspiracy, hoaxes are too good. Yes, I completely agree. Completely.
Yeah.
So
Bizarre.
let me see, where was
Let's
where was
talk all
our
about this crazy?
What episode was our JFK episode?
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, we had an episode, Timur, on conspiracies, and I presented the JFK one, and I went through a tiny bit of that BS report they created, the government created, and I talked about the magic bullet theory.
Yeah, season 1, episode
quiet
22.
Season 1, episode 22 is our conspiracy theory one.
And
that
people
we talk
claiming
about
that nuclear
JFK.
weapons never happened and don't exist.
Right.
And that we landed on the moon, which we didn't. Just saying. Yeah, we
those
did.
two.
I'm not gonna lie. After that episode, I went to work the next day, and I'm like, "Do y'all know about the magic bullet?"
Yeah.
And because I still had all the reference materials on my phone, I'm like, "Look
Check
at
this
this!
out.
Look at this!" And like, how did that happen? Huh?
You know, I can imagine. Right, I can imagine how that might have happened, but it was just a shoddy investigation. And you
Yeah,
just
it wasn't
killed
great.
The president of the United States in the '60s
And did a terrible investigation on it.
and did a terrible investigation.
All right, who's the next one we got?
All right, yeah. So we
You
don't
hinted
have
at it.
We don't have pictures for this one, but I'm going to tell you about her. So
Okay.
this was Margaret Hogren, an 89-year-old widow, another old lady, who lived alone in a house in Prussia Street, Dublin, Ireland, who was found burned almost to the point of complete destruction on 28th of March, 1970.
How old was she?
89. The plastic flowers on the table in the center of the room had been reduced to liquid, and a television with a melted screen sat 12 feet from the armchair in which the ashen remains were found. Otherwise, the surroundings were completely untouched. Her 2 feet and both legs from below the knees were undamaged. A small coal fire had been burning in the grate when a neighbor left the house the previous day. However, no connection between this fire and that in which Miss Hogan died could be found. An inquest held on April 3rd of 1970 recorded her death by burning, with the cause of the fire listed as unknown.
You know, that's another thing. We don't have inquests here. I think maybe investigation would be much more highbrow if we had inquests instead.
Well, there's
The joke.
there's a way to do it
The joke.
under the statute, but
It's a joke.
the problem is inquests bring in jurors.
Ah, do they?
They do.
So what's the difference between an inquest and an investigation?
The inquest determines a cause and a manner. I don't remember the statute here in Arkansas. It's been a long time since I've read it, but you bring in jurors and they're fact binders.
The multiple heads on the evidence, except they're
Right.
all untrained.
They're all untrained, and at this point, I think I trust
great.
many of our local citizens, but I think that
I don't
I trust our fellow citizens with a lot, but I I really think you need some training, some real training.
Yeah, that doesn't
Some
sound like a
academic
good solution.
snobbery, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't. I don't know. Yeah, that doesn't sound.
There's stuff that Timur's written that we probably ought to get into, but it's not a this show. But he says interesting stuff, and I think would be interesting for another conspiracy story. Did you figure out that JFK was Jimmy Carter and MLK was Don King? I think that made me laugh too. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. We should talk about it, just not on this show. Timur, thank you for these fabulous ideas.
Yeah, we've got another conspiracy episode coming this season. I promise you.
Yeah.
There's so many more that we were going to cover. It's just, we are adults with full-time jobs.
Right? My clients expect me to show up and practice law. It's the craziest thing.
Like every day.
I like every day, and when I'm not here, they're shocked.
Like we have office hours or something.
It's weird.
So we've got 2 more cases, and one of them doesn't have pictures, but the last one does. But we do have several other pictures afterwards. So our next one is Henry Thomas, a 73-year-old man, was found burned to death in the living room of his council house on the Rossau State Estate in, how do you pronounce that? EBBW? Ibu?
EBBW.
It's in Wales. EBBW, yeah.
So that's basically a council house. So it's
Ebervale.
Yeah, but if you've ever heard Welsh spoken,
I'm sure it makes a lot of sense in Welsh.
yeah,
I'm sure it does.
Welsh
I only
wouldn't
know
make
one
much sense
person
to us.
who remotely speaks Welsh and has had maybe 1 year of classes in
Who?
Henry.
Welsh?
Welsh. He
What
just decided
a-
one day he was going to learn Welsh. And,
What a
right.
left-hand turn linguistically, because like why? Not a lot of people in the world
You know, the other
still
thing, too,
speak
before
Welsh.
I assume there are pictures
Who would you
here, but-
talk to?
Right. He found somebody online. You can find people online to teach you live language.
Oh my
So
god.
one of the things that I think are interesting here is all these people seem to be older.
I'm going to see if I can find a way to pronounce this right quick. But yeah, I'm
Timur
with you.
says the law, my favorite conspiracy topic. I wrote same right back to him. Man, same. Yeah, I think there's no photos of the 70 case. That person in Ireland that just basically burned up. All we have is the description that we read, which is unfortunate. See, back even in those days, and they had an inquest, a coroner's inquest on it.
No one was taking pictures.
No one was taking pictures. They didn't think of it as a tool, which is really unfortunate. When I investigated deaths, I had 2 cameras. One I shot slide film on, and we would have slide reviews every Thursday. And I had a Polaroid camera that I would take a couple of quick pictures on just in case I needed them, especially when, the family gets to the funeral home and says, oh, that investigator stole her $32 million diamond necklace that was on her when she was put in that body bag. And I had a picture of her in the body bag without said $32 million diamond necklace. So we used the photos for a lot of stuff. Or sometimes I'd see something weird, and I knew before we could get the stuff developed, I would want to talk about something, and so I'd take a photo of it and bring it to the autopsy the next morning or later that day, depending on the time.
So Google Translate wasn't helpful in pronouncing this. It just said EBBW. So
I wonder if it's an abbreviation like NM or AR or AZ.
Let's do what we do. Let's pull something up.
Yeah.
EBBW Vale. Wow, it's a thing.
Oh, that's just the name of the place. Okay.
That's how do you pronounce that? EBBW Vale. That's just it.
I don't know.
Ibla. Yeah. Any hoots. So this was in South Wales in the 1980s. Most of his body was incinerated, leaving only his skull and part of each leg below the knee. The feet and legs were still clothed in socks and trousers. Half of the chair in which he had been sitting was also destroyed. Police forensics officers decided that the incineration of Thomas was due to the wick effect.
Right.
Which is...
This is what our National Institutes of Health says.
Well, and they really got that from the FBI investigation, because that's what the FBI finally said that first case in the 50s was from. They finally ruled it to be the wick effect.
Right.
And they really coined that, and no one else ever...
Right. Do we have photos for this one?
We don't have for this one, but the next one we do.
Okay.
And then we have a few others that I wasn't able to pull the information together to give a good full story. But
we can look at the photos. All right.
So we got some photos.
The last lady from Ireland, we don't have photos. This one from Wales, we don't have photos. We just have the description. Interesting, and it's, you know, in this modern society where everyone has a photo, everyone has a video, it's hard to think back in those days, you know, how it was, or even to be able to rely on it. I could make a description of something and, you know, have 4 eyewitnesses and get statements, and there would be, you know, you'd think they were all at different places. So it's really hard. I think photos and videos are very, very helpful. Very helpful.
I mean, even in the 80s.
Really, right. I used to think I took really good photos, and I'm sure compared to today's technology, they were not great. I had a 35mm Canon camera, and I would go take photos with it. They used to tease me because I'd take flash photography, and I'd also take available light photography. And they'd be like, "You have very artistic photos of unalive scenes." Well, thank you so much, right? But you know, I think probably compared to what we have today, we just have very, very fine cameras on most of our phones. Yeah. And that just take really amazing photography and video. And it's, you know, the old saying of picture's worth 1,000 words. It's just very, I think it's a lot more helpful.
Yeah. So our last case that we have description of, you ready for this one? In 2010.
Oh,
that's pretty recent.
That's recent. I didn't know there was one so recent.
Yeah. So this was 2010. An Irish pensioner was found burned to death in his home with minimal fire damage elsewhere. A coroner controversially ruled the cause of death as SHC.
In Ireland?
Really? Yeah. A reigniting debate about the phenomenon's validity. Excuse me.
So Timor's wondering what the definition of wick effect is, so this is probably a great place to look. Wow.
Oh, that's a really good photo.
Well,
yes.
Well, I mean comparatively,
it's small, and I zoomed in.
Yeah.
This is the best one I could find.
Huh.
Although 2010, still using that TV.
Well, he said he was a pensioner.
Yeah, I mean,
that might be the thing he got on his wedding. And
I mean, my couch and TV downstairs in my living room look like this because I have a retro corner. And if I were gonna die, that's where it would be.
So what else do we know about this story?
That's really it.
Who could articulate the definition of wicking?
I can.
The wicking.
It's like an inside out candle. So if you think of, like, you know, the paraffin in paraffin wax is a petroleum product, and it acts as the fuel. It starts out as the wick that's the fuel, but it melts the wax, and then the wax begins to burn by traveling up the wick, right? Like a capillary effect. Just like how water's drawn up through a tree, you know, etc. So the wick effect, or the theory behind wick effect, I don't know whether or not I think that's the explanation, but the theory behind the wick effect is that essentially the person's clothing, right, acts like a sort of wick around the candle, and your body fat becomes the fuel source and sort of wicks up through the clothes, except in their version of the wick effect, they claim that you never quite have like just like full on open flame. It's sort of like a smoldering and reigniting thing, and it just sort of works its way down. And a lot of these people, it gets down to the knee-ish and stops burning. Now, that could either be because the legs have nothing to support them and they fall over, or your calves don't have, and your knee certainly doesn't have much in the way of fat in it. So their explanation for why they end up having, elbow down, knee down, is once you get to the joint, right here around the joint, there's not much other than tendon and connective tissue until you meet up at the next muscle. Every muscle has a little sheathing of fat. But that's their theory for the wick effect, is that's how it's a convenient way to explain it, because they're like, oh yeah, but then when it gets to the elbow, there's nothing there, and it falls, or it falls out of the way of whatever's happening. My general issue with the wick effect is, like we talked about earlier, though, the vast majority of your liquid water in your body is here to here, and all of these incidences seem to start here.
Right.
And that's difficult because even a skinny dude, like me, I got just as much water in me per gram of tissue as anybody else. It doesn't change. And even a really big person, even though there's that fat, those fat are still cells. And those cells still have a lot of water in them. Even within your fat, there's still quite a lot of water. That's why, fat, let's say we're talking about your steak, that's why fat versus when it's rendered looks very different, right? Or tallow, like you use for tallow candles, beef fat, looks very different than when it was fat before you rendered. It's very jiggly and watery until you render it, and then it becomes waxy and thick.
Another thing that Timur says is the camera quality, though. One photo in the 2010 case are right. And
yeah.
But that might just be the only photo they released, or the one they sold to somebody or something.
It's probably not the only photo.
It's probably not the only photo, but boy, it's just.
So let me do this. Let me close the photo, and I'm going to open it.
Okay.
And it's going to be the original resolution that was published.
Okay. All right.
That's the resolution that was published.
So it's not even the original photo.
Real crappy. And it's funny because he says one photo, though. I completely agree. I would shoot
so many.
If it was not a homicide, I would shoot 25 to 30 photos on.
I would
every death scene that was not a hospice case.
Every 15 degrees, shoot a photo.
Yeah, I imagine that since this was weird, and this was in a time when everybody's using a lot of photo evidence for any death. Like he said, 25 to 30 for a non-homicide, death scene. That's still a lot for someone that you're not concerned.
I investigated deaths prior to this year, 2010. I investigated deaths prior to 2010. I'd already been practicing law for 10 years by the time this photo was supposedly taken. And
And you shot a lot of photos.
Yeah, and I shot a lot of photos, but it's not just because I had an interest in photography, which I did, but that was just what we were required to do.
So I imagine
we had a very specific way we would take photos and process a scene photographically.
I imagine there were a lot more photos, but we've run into the issue of privacy, and a lot of this stuff is stuck somewhere in a file.
Yeah, stuck somewhere in a file, and we don't have any authority to get it.
This is what we could scrape off the internet.
Where was this again, in Ireland?
This was, it just says an Irish pensioner. Doesn't give much other information. I mean, I could probably Google something right quick.
That's all right.
But yeah, there's probably more photos, but they're not just out.
I mean, look at this photo we got of the guy. How do we have this photo? Yeah, that freaking Timu ad.
Right. And Timur says, and this is just, it was my point earlier, and he just says this, and this photo is so sus, I agree. He says, okay, there's near 1,000 degree temperature fire or more. Really probably needs to be more. And the rug and the chairs are not touched, and the tablecloth. Look at the tablecloth back there.
Yeah.
So that's the issue with whole.
This is hard. These things are hard for me to believe.
Well, and that's the whole issue with the SHC to begin with. Like that's the problem, is that you wouldn't even think anything of it if the whole house burned down and the body was completely burnt. You'd be like, yeah, that doesn't really happen. But if the whole house burnt down, you'd be like, but I mean,
but this is what we're dealing with. This is why we're investigating it.
Yeah, this is why this keeps coming up, because this sort of thing keeps happening. And so people keep being like, well, but is it SHC?
You know, the only
we
thing
don't know.
that might make any sense is the wicking thing and just this real slow burning. But boy, I just...
It's very hard to believe.
This is hard to believe.
Especially if you're into...
It's hard to believe, and yet here are people that are unalive that are mostly cremated.
And the surroundings mostly.
And the surroundings are not near as burned as you might expect.
Hence why we decided to cover it, because that's the real problem behind all this stuff that we cover. Is you have this fantastical seeming thing, which makes you want to jump to fantastical conclusions, and then we look for holes in those fantastical conclusions and try to find something else. And the really good stories, the best we've got is, I mean, I don't have anything else, so that doesn't mean that it's this fantastical thing, but it means that we still don't have a better explanation for it, and that's what's most interesting.
You know, there's a place
that we cover.
There's a place in Tennessee called the Body Farm, and they take unalived people. They take unalived people who've been donated to science. And if I worked at the Body Farm, I would want a pretty fresh unalived person
and try to recreate.
I might want to try to recreate this.
Okay,
because so how else do we learn this other than doing this? And the Body Farms created amazing research for us to understand forensically what happens.
Absolutely. So that brings us to a point I was bringing up earlier at the beginning of the episode, was that the BBC did a documentary in the 90s, the late 90s, where they recreated some of these crime scenes and made scale models of the people, and they were able to recreate these crime scenes with what they called the wicking effect. Yeah.
Because our National Institutes of Health, I think, has concluded that it's wicking.
Yeah, so the wicking is what they're going to say. And I feel like I haven't done it yet, but tinfoil hat. This is their blanket excuse. Oh, right. Well, we've proved that wicking is a thing, so it's wicking.
It must be. Right.
So it's wicking. Here you go. It's wicking. This person
Without
died
evidence
weird.
necessarily that it was.
Well, it fits the mold of the other two models. It's wicking.
I'm concerned that while they did it with small scale models, that discounts a serious part of thermodynamics.
Well, that's why I'd like, listen, if
you don't do a full scale model, it doesn't apply.
If I were a researcher professor at the Body Farm, I'd be like, you know, this is bizarre. Let's see if we can't recreate this and try to understand this a bit.
Because by their nature, the smaller the model, like with something like this, the smaller the variety of biochemicals and biotissues, the less complexity and the more uniform the burn. Plus, just like the reason King Kong couldn't exist, because the amount of weight per density of bone, you know, his bones would have to be made out of something we don't even know about to even support their own weight under gravity. It's the same thing with fire. When you get smaller, fire gets much more efficient. As you get bigger, right, like on a person, right, the fire would be less efficient and there'd be more room for variability, you know, access to air, what part of the body it's on, the contours and the topography of the body itself. I think doing models doesn't quite cover it.
And then everybody's different. You know, I might look like a slim fella. I've got a big gut. I've got a bunch of fat. I might burn better than y'all.
Right.
So, did they take, body mass index into effect?
What I think might be interesting is to see their health records from before, see what their weight is.
Sure, yeah.
What medicines they took, what their conditions were. and then start doing a retrospective study, but it really won't probably be very statistically significant unless something just really jumps out at you. Because what are we going to have? We're going to have
a sample of 3 people.
cases,
Yeah,
couple dozen cases at most.
Yeah,
at most.
It's not a big enough sampling for
right, and to try to see, that's sort of the hard thing of these weird phenomena, right?
If it weren't rare, we'd probably know what it is.
Right.
Right. If it weren't weird and rare and super unheard of, we'd probably already have had a chance to study it and know what it is.
Right.
And even know what the signs are.
And Timor says fat doesn't burn hot enough. I agree. I really don't think it burns hot enough.
Yeah, I don't think the wicking effect explains it.
No, I've just had real problem with the wicking effect, but I just don't have a good answer. Many burned bodies out there, he says. The phenomena is the bones to ash. That's super rare. I agree. You need a lot of heat. A lot of heat.
Yeah.
And fat doesn't burn hot enough. I agree. Can prove that, and the water content's too high. That's been my problem, Timor. Because
the water content's my biggest sticking
point. They're all burned up right here. There's nothing left in the body, and I cannot. I'm having a really hard time understanding how that happened.
I heard on one of the shows I watched, a lady claimed to have solved what was causing spontaneous human combustion.
Okay, tell us.
And you're like, oh, good, somebody knows. Except she was some sort of a spiritualist.
Oh, I see.
You might already know where I'm going with this. And so she said that their aura was too bright for this world, and that the fire actually started in their pineal gland and the fatty tissues of the brain, and it started to smolder there, and then the fire broke out from the top down like a candle.
You know, I have an interesting...
I'm not giving that any credence. I'm just saying people have had all kinds of weird ideas about what this could be because it's that weird.
So I have an interesting thought.
Because if you want to make theories that don't require any science, I can make a whole bunch of theories that don't, if we just don't want it.
And speaking of theories that don't require science, let me tell a little story and then make a suggestion. Back in my death investigation days, I worked in New Mexico, and the hantavirus had started.
Ah, yes.
And boy, it was rough. I also worked another job as a paramedic, and we transported people who were flown in on death's doorstep over to the university hospital. Transported them from the airport after having been flown from the reservation. CDC was there, New Mexico Department of Health, everyone everywhere was trying to figure this out. The tribal medicine people said it was the mice. And at first they were laughed at and couldn't be that. And they're like, no, there's a story and the mice come and blah, blah, blah. You have to clean up the mice. You have to do whatever. Turns out mouse pee transmits hantavirus. It gets mice go into these places. It's very dry there. They pee. It gets on the dust. It gets aerosolized. You breathe it in, and it just kills you, especially if you're young.
It dries out in the heat,
kills you dead and fast. And the tribal elders were right. So sometimes there's interesting ancient wisdom passed down in stories, myths, or something else that might have something. So I wonder what some of these tribal elders might know, or what some of Vedic or Hindu teachings might say about it. And I've never thought to look into this. Or what some of the high lamas in Buddhism might say about this situation. I wonder what the different ancient knowledges have, because if you can't figure it out scientifically, I think you might as well just start looking at other stuff.
Well,
just trying to figure out what is it? What was it?
And like you said, there's often stories that while the story itself, it's not coded, but it's a story so that people remember.
Right.
But it's a story to encapsulate a truth,
right,
about a happening, right, so that nobody forgets, but they make it into a story that's memorable. And so, yeah, I didn't even think of that. I wish I'd thought of that before the show to actually look and see if there are similar, like they're not going to call it spontaneous human combustion, but stories of people, becoming fire or something like that in like Hindu traditions or something.
I don't think I have any connections to anyone high enough in Hinduism or Buddhism that I might be able to call and say what's the story?
Let me interject. Think about the Buddhist training,
Phoenix, right?
That these Buddhists will go out into a cave and meditate for 6-7 years, and then their final training is they go down and bathe in a frozen lake.
Correct.
And then they steam dry themselves.
Right.
They manage to raise their body temperature.
Right.
And you can
see that's why I
see
right.
see
that's
the
why I
water
was thinking.
evaporate off.
And Timur says the phoenix, right? It's the myth and the story of the phoenix, right? This person, this bird, this being coming out of the fire and the ash. What does that mean? I think that's an interesting thought. And I have heard of, I have seen stories of, I've seen pictures of Buddhist monks meditating, melting the snow around them.
Yeah.
And
making enough heat around them to actually push a ring.
Yeah, to make enough heat around them to push that.
To melt a ring of snow around them.
I know how you can give somebody a fever by manipulating their ankle, but that's about
what a horrible thing.
Well,
but I left something out, and intentionally so.
Tell us.
Let's go back to the beginning of the episode.
All right.
Of Mary Resser.
Okay. Don't tell me she was a Buddhist.
It's the other shoe.
It's the other shoe.
It's gonna drop.
Getting ready to drop. Here we go. You ready?
Come on. Yeah, we're ready.
All that remained of Mary Resser, who became known as
High Lama,
who became known as the Cinder Woman, were part of her left foot that was wearing a slipper, which we saw that. But here's more that wasn't in the photo. Her backbone and her skull. Plastic household objects in the distance from the seat were softened and had lost their shapes. However, Resser's skull had survived and was found among the ashes, but shrunken to the size of a teacup. A description disputed by the fire researcher who was in Bradenton for a conference at the time managed to view the scene.
So, what did he say, that it wasn't shrunken?
He said that it wasn't, but the medical examiner says that it was shrunken.
Huh.
So this is the one outlier of all of these where the skull was shrunken to the size of a teacup. We're talking like this.
Right.
Well, I just don't know if I can.
Yeah, because
however,
don't shrink unless
we don't have photo evidence.
Fire doesn't shrink bone.
Alien doom ray coming down from above would definitely shrink a skull. I mean, it is known.
Aliens.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've got. It's either aliens or, as Timur says now, we've got some voodoo. Right.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's
voodoo.
voodoo.
Proposed. Astronaut theorists proposed.
Voodoo. Yeah. That's what they propose. Voodoo.
I mean, so I remember seeing that part about that story about her skull being shrunken, but I think that might be confirmation bias.
Right.
Right. I don't know about that. I didn't hear there was a teacup. I thought it had shrunk by like a third or half.
And listen,
but still,
all respect to people in the 50s who investigated unalives and did autopsies and that sort of thing, but I'm not sure. The person who made that statement, you don't know if they were an MD physician who was a consultant, as the UK says, the forensic pathologist. We just don't know.
And people still believed in phrenology then. Like, people were still looking at phrenology as a real way to determine somebody's personality based on the shape of their
10
skull.
years outside of the Second War.
So let's take into shrunken head theory.
The nuclear weapon made everything possible.
Absolutely.
Everything could happen.
Right.
So when when we think about shrunken heads, we think of voodoo. The way a shrunken head is made is
Right.
No skull.
The skull is removed.
Yeah.
And it's boiled in salt water.
Yeah, they fill the head full of rocks.
And,
Yeah,
and here's
so-
what
and
Timor
boiled
says:
salt.
who's not taking a photo of a teacup skull? Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Show
just
me a
don't
picture
believe
of
it.
somebody holding.
Right. Show me the teacup skull.
Anything.
Give me the
Anything.
teacup
Yeah.
skull.
Yeah, anything. Or the backbone laying there. Anything.
All right, I'm gonna have to go and research how they do shrunken heads. I don't.
So,
you need to
yeah,
know?
so shrunken
Yeah,
head.
I mean, I hear you, but it's been a long time since I've read it. So but I'm with Timor. Where is the picture of
Okay.
this? Come on, even in the 50s, you're gonna be like, "Wow, I'm gonna get a picture of this because I
Whoa,
can."
yeah, right.
So
Yeah,
I have a great
totally.
example of how generations have changed.
Tell me.
And I'm not that old yet, but this is how different it is. So I'm 39. Whenever I was younger, they have a museum in Indianapolis called the Children's Museum. Right? Makes you think of like, the children's section of the Natural History Museum. No, this was an 8-level industrial building sized museum. It was just for kids, but it was 8 levels and like, 8 or 9, 5-room exhibits on every level. It was huge. Well, they always had 3 to 4 traveling exhibits. And when I went one time, they had shrunken heads, actual shrunken heads from the Smithsonian that were touring through there. And it had a whole description of the process by which they were made. And then they had real ones there on display of shrunken heads. That's how I knew, before Victus said how they make them, that's how I knew how they made them, because they talked about it. And they had little, like, illustrations, little simplified illustrations of the process step by step.
Huh.
Yeah. But you would never have that now in a children's museum.
No.
Children's. Says children's out on the front of it. You would never have that on there.
Theorists propose.
I see. That's
couldn't help
that's too bad that we probably wouldn't have that now. I'd hate to.
I thought it
agree
was
with you, but
fascinating.
I'm afraid that you're wrong.
They also cooked. They had an insect exhibit, and they were showing how insects could be protein substitute, and they actually cooked mealworms.
Did you eat them?
They fried them. Yeah, they were crispy. They were turned into nothing on the inside, and then the outside was crispy, and it was like big Rice Krispies, but with a salty center. Yeah, they just
I've
fried
had-
them in oil and put salt on them.
I've had fried crickets.
Yeah. They did. They had cricket meal turned into bread. That's
So
the thing.
so we've been off topic a little bit. We have 3 pictures from other
All right,
SHC.
Let's.
Do you
see.
want to see them?
No,
Yep,
no
let's see it.
backgrounds on them.
No background, not particularly. So
And
we
while
have
you're
like
getting-
a couple sentences, but nothing worth
And
saying.
while you're getting them up, let me tell you what Timor says. The shrunk
Yeah.
heads are an old circus attraction. The freak show is legend. Got a question for the medical examiner person. I guess that's me from long ago. Ever look into the catacombs? What does it take to clean and preserve those bones? So,
Beatles.
so yeah, beetles are an amazing thing. So I never have thought about or read about how they get the bones into the catacombs and clean them. But I do have experience at the University of New Mexico about what happens to bodies.
I know how the ones in France happened when you're done. I can tell you how that
so
happened.
you can tell us about the, because you've been to the ones in France. Yep, I've
I
been
can
to the
tell you how it
catacombs
happened.
in
It's
So, and if I knew, I've forgotten. But here's what happens modern. If you're going to donate your body to science and they determine that they're going to use you to study the bones, they're going to take you to what's called the bug room. And the bugs are going to basically clean the whole skeleton off. And it's usually done within a month or so. It's amazing. All right, tell us about the catacombs.
okay. So mostly now, I don't know about in every country because catacombs exist in more places than Paris. Obviously, the Paris catacombs are some of the most famous, but they exist in a lot of places. So the Paris ones came about. Everybody thinks of the catacombs as like this is how they stored the bodies. Not what happened. What happened was they were burying people anywhere in Paris that they could find open ground, including basements, anywhere, because it's hard to overstate the number of people that died in a short amount of time. Now, it was years that this went on, right? So that's the other thing. There's a length of time and there's a number of bodies. So most of the ground in France had so many bodies buried and reburied on top of each other that the ground was described as gelatinous.
Ugh.
Because you're not giving enough room, right? In a given, because they had long since stopped caring about caskets. It was wrap the body up, put it in the ground. So that caused two problems. One, the ground was becoming gelatinous because it was mostly corpse. It was not soil at this point, right? And they put the soil back on, and so you had these mounded areas also becoming gelatinous, right, as decomposition happened. Also, this was causing the water supply to become undrinkable, right? Because they're all still wells, right? And so this not well done decomposition and groundwater, two things happened. One, you couldn't get water in the city because none of the wells were safe to drink in. And two, these mounds would eventually become not gelatinous and just liquefy and would slough off into the street. Because remember, they keep getting built up. And in some cases, they just threw the bodies on the ground and brought in dirt and piled it on. And you just kept doing this. Church courtyards, any open ground, parks, anything. So they would rupture these areas or sink in or whatever, or a building would fall into it because it had destroyed the foundation next to it. The catacombs are the cleanup. The only thing could be picked out of this mass were bones. And you had to do something with it, and they still had, a sense that something needed to be done with them. You didn't just cart all this stuff out and throw it outside of town. A lot of it they did. But as they would move this stuff, bones would become apparent, and they'd separate the bone, right? And then separate the bone. Well, now they felt like they needed to do something because these people were at rest, and now they're not. And so that's how the stacking of the bones came across, because you had a lot of bones. You'd be like, oh, these are all femurs, let's just put all the femurs. And so you still wanted them to be at rest, but they needed to get all this stuff out of the ground, and they had an understanding, or they figured out, even without having testing, that it was the bodies causing this. So they're afraid that they didn't know if it was what part of the body. So they dug deeper places, right, and put the bones way underground, just the bones, and the rest of it was moved. The rest of the mass and dirt was moved out of town. So that's how it was. It wasn't so much that you had people just stripping bodies, right? Though later some of that may have happened, but the initial impetus for the catacombs is that you had these things happening from trying to just bury people, throw them on the ground, stack more dirt, throw them on the ground, stack more dirt. I mean, it's hard to overstate how little people were left to actually even do the burying, let alone figure out a reasonable way to do it. Most people were sick themselves. A lot of people got sick from it and survived too. Most everybody would have gotten sick from it. Some survived. There was no real running from bubonic plague.
Yeah.
So that's how they got stacked like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't.
At least in Paris, that's how they got stacked like that.
All right, show us the pictures.
All right, we got a few more pictures. So we looked at Dr. John Irving. So this is Jeanette. It's a Polish name. I'm horrible with Polish names. Kazmierzak. Bunch of names. Anyway.
Oh, geez.
Yes.
Huh. There's
So
even
was
like
there
there's
a bird
still
in that bird cage?
not currently.
It doesn't look like there was. Yeah,
So
like
it's interesting. There's still charred bone there.
or an outline of the bone.
Maybe they picked him up.
His shoes are awfully clean to be in a dusty crime scene.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you think it's fake?
It's either fake or this is a photo of like a wax museum.
Like a recreation of one?
Could be.
Because that doesn't seem like enough ash. Though maybe. I guess people don't make quite
The
as
other
much ash
weird
as you
thing
think.
is, look at the wall right above the guy's back. It looks like it's hard to know what that is, but are those drip marks?
Like it's paint.
Like
Or,
here.
like you sprayed water in there and then water dripped down on some of it. It almost looks like wiping back and forth in a horizontal way.
Yeah. You're talking about right here. It's it's very linear.
Right. Kind of
It
weird.
makes
I don't,
it makes me feel like this photo maybe is from like a wax museum, because there is a wax museum for spontaneous human combustion.
is there?
There is, but the photos are like obviously fake. For this one, I wasn't sure. It's hard to tell.
It's weird.
It's a
Timor
cool
says it's
photo, though.
funky. It sure is.
It's a cool photo.
All right, what's the next photo?
All right, next one is Helen Conway.
See, this was one of the ones that I thought
Right.
you were
I
going to end up
remember this
covering
one.
because this is a pretty famous one.
See, look, there's that dripping again.
Right. What do you know about this one?
So this one was a much younger woman. And that was the thing, is it was her long calves were all that was left. But this was the one that I thought was the lady in New York. I thought this was that photo.
Where is this one? Wait, I'm sorry.
It doesn't say where this one is.
But this looks like, there was it was pretty warm there, because look at the tables scorched and there's stuff around it burned, but this is just weird.
And most of the chair, half the chair. So this is one that I saw covered in the show that I saw when I was younger. That's where I recognize this.
Oh, what do you remember of it, if anything?
Just the same sort of conditions. Most things that were around the torso were obliterated and then, or destroyed. And then things, once they got just a little ways away from it, didn't seem to have gotten that hot. And it was from the knee down, and the legs stayed, almost in the sitting position. But I think the femurs were still attached. They're blackened, but I think the femurs were still attached, and they kept the legs sitting upright in the position.
I just think it'd be fascinating to have seen this in person.
So this is from Codersport, Pennsylvania, who was found destroyed by fire in December of 1966. There was a charred hole in the floor beneath the body, but the house was otherwise undamaged. This is all that remained of Helen Conway, a victim of spontaneous human combustion in 1960. In 1964, the fire chief who reported on the case said her torso was consumed within 21 minutes, far too short of a time for the wick effect to have been the explanation.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did he? I wonder how he knew it was 21.
Yeah, I
minutes.
wonder how.
I guess
he knew
that's
it was
all you
21
got.
minutes.
Yeah, there's very little information.
For such a bizarre phenomena, it's shockingly little information with all this stuff. It's shockingly little.
And here's our last one, Robert Francis Bailey.
That is
Where
head
this-
over there on the right.
Yeah, this is his head, which, looking at it, still his hair, which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like
And you
this
can
one
kind of see his legs going down there towards the bottom. I think, like he fell across the banister and got stuck.
like this one almost feels like arson. Like
Yeah.
like somebody killed him and then burned him.
Tried to burn. Yeah, because there's a lot left.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there should be hair on his head, but yeah, there's a lot left.
Oh, that it wouldn't be unusual.
It wouldn't be?
No.
Okay, so this seems more like somebody trying to cover up a,
What do we know about
something
this one?
else.
We don't know much. That's the problem with these three photos, is we didn't get much information.
I would think this is
we got
somebody
like
that's
two
trying to
sentences.
I would think this is someone trying to cover up a homicide.
That's what this one specifically feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't seem like because it also doesn't seem to have the hallmarks of the rest. This looks like a lot of stuff burned.
Yeah, this one is very different. Where this house feels like it's like looking in the background, bunch of trash on the ground. Quite
That's
a bit
what
of the rest of the house is burned.
That's what it looks like after you fought a house fire.
Yeah, this looks like a bunch of burnt debris that fell down from above all around him.
So this is Robert Francis Bailey. Let me see what I can find about him right quick.
This is also zoomed in 500%. Jeez.
Yeah.
Jeez. What a
Yeah,
What a bad shot.
when we have to zoom stuff in 500%, my goodness.
jeez.
Oh, all right. Oh, wow. The first picture on this website has my car. That's kind of weird.
The internet knows. The algorithm knows you.
Yeah, right.
It knows all about you.
The fire damage to the property was minimal. The only fire damage to the house was on the floor directly below where the body had burning. Aside from the abdomen area where the fire had originated, his clothes were intact, unaffected by fire. To extinguish the flame completely, the hose had been placed within the slit within Bailey's stomach. Original cause of death was determined to be asphyxia due to inhalation of fire fumes. But after reviewing the case further, his death was deemed to have been due to unknown causes.
This might be more akin to the napalm thing. That might have been an assassination of some sort.
There is a reference to meth.
Well.
One theory was that all of the meth in his gut reacted to the igniter of some sort. However, no external means of ignition were found on his body, and he was a non-smoker.
Well, and while it's pretty volatile for the biological system, it's not necessarily.
Yeah, it's not
flammable.
flammable.
It's not necessarily
It's not
flammable.
flammable.
That's funny though. Something else I remember seeing on the program that I watched that covered the lady in New York that the FBI investigated. They had even come up with such strange theories before they decided on the Wick effect as something they were calling cold fire. And here was their thought about cold fire. It was a type of combustion that produced cold rather than heat, which is not a thing. But they were afraid that this was something that the Russians had come up with. And their proposition for this was that above, it didn't catch the ceiling above her on fire, but there was a hole through the floor. Like gravity, like thermodynamics had reversed, and it was burning downward. That was something they explored. Like, could you put a giant heating element above her and burn her from, the top down? Could you? They explored all kinds of weird stuff as weapons. When you think of a giant curler dryer, they're like, why would you even design that to burn one person? It doesn't seem much like a weapon.
So this is photos from the BBC documentary. Oh, they're so small. Jeez.
Yeah, terrible.
Oh, is this their Wick experiment?
Oh, look, they did do scale photos.
Okay. With a whole pig.
Yeah, it's a whole torso, and there's like a TV up here.
To see if it would leave random items unharmed.
That's interesting.
Huh.
Yeah, very interesting.
So,
Not the best photos, but they're from the 90s.
And they claimed that this worked. And
they claim that wicking was the effect. So they used a pig torso or a pig body.
And did it leave the pig's feet?
The scientists believe they demonstrated how a cause of spontaneous human combustion can occur through normal processes on a person who has been knocked unconscious. The wick effect means that a person could burn slowly without attracting attention from passerby. It also explains why part of the body, which was rich in fat, burns while the rest stays intact.
Huh.
So
Well, that
they
would
did.
explain
It says
the abdomen.
pig's bones were destroyed after 5 hours.
Yeah.
5 hours of a slow burn.
Boy, I don't know.
Curiouser
That's-
and curious.
If that's what they really, if that's what they found, it's what they found. But my goodness,
If that's the case, and they stumbled on a more fuel efficient way to cremate bodies, it just takes longer. If that's really
Right.
the case.
it's gonna put all those retort machine people out of business.
Yeah.
Just wrap them up in a cloth and light the end. Use its own fuel.
So, we've come to the part of our episode. Final conclusion.
Here, let's ask Timur. Timur, tell us
Timur,
what
what do you
your
think?
final conclusion is, man.
Let's get what is your official
Is this phenomena of spontaneous human combustion real? Is it not real? Is maybe some of it real?
is it aliens?
Aliens. Ancient astronaut theorists propose.
Yeah, it sounds like we'd see this happen often. Boy, I kind of think so too. As many people as lay around with cigarettes and stuff. if we were just walking torches, right? Because I just
I had to do it. I'm sorry. I'm getting off the soundboard now. There we go. Yeah, it's so. Ayan, what do you think? What do you think about spontaneous human combustion after seeing all the evidence?
So I guess
such as it is.
So I guess I'd like to see this thing they did with these pigs because it's interesting, right? Because that's similar to what the body farm would do. So
Right.
I'd like to see that more than a single picture of some fire over a pig and say that it worked. I'd like to actually see like footage,
Right.
and the end remains and all that. Like if I could see that, I'd have a little more opinion about the wick effect. Otherwise, I feel like the wick effect is bogus. I mean, I get what they're getting after, but I feel like it's bogus. If I could see more of their stuff, I'd be willing to consider it. But having not, I'm not. I don't think it's a paranormal thing. But if it's either not, we're either looking at something and not recognizing what it is, like we're looking at something and we're thinking, oh, it must be that they
Right.
spontaneously combust. Either we're really looking at a crime and we just don't know what the crime is, right? Like it's somebody was pretty ingenious in what they were doing.
Oh, wait a second. Oh, I just figured out why the rest of the room didn't burn.
Why?
So this is the BBC documentary that
Okay.
I got pulled up on the other screen here. Look at the amount of moisture that recondenses on the walls and windows here.
Because it's evaporating the liquid out of the body
And it's recondensing on the walls,
and keeping it coolish.
keeping it from
Because
burning.
that's kind of in line with what Timur
That's
says.
it.
And here's his idea. Sounds like we would see this happen often if we're just walking torches. No people may pass gas, but they are not fuel for fires. Made of 80% of water or more. So I guess if the water's
75.
I guess if the water's evaporating out of them,
So
it's
if
a-
the
it's a
water's
lot of water.
evaporating, it's going to stick to the walls.
right?
So if the wick effect is also causing a dehydration as it's happening, like it's also causing,
Because the water isn't just disappearing; it goes somewhere. It's just,
and you're in a closed
just-
closed system, and also the doors are closed, so you don't get like a whoosh
Right.
ever to burn up the wick too fast. I mean,
So the moisture is sticking to the walls. The person is burning because they're full of fat. And the walls and surrounding area don't burn because there's moisture stuck to them, and it's got nowhere to go.
So the problem that I have with this is you're talking about a sort of perfect system,
and that's why we've only heard 10 or 12 situations since the 1800s.
Right. I mean, I guess if you're gonna consider the perfect conditions model, right, of like if so many things line up just right, then you have this thing happen, right? They were almost all of these were elderly people. Almost all of them were retired, right, and sedentary. I could give some. I could lend some credence to that. Right, they're all fairly sedentary, and I think at least the 50s, 60s, and 70s one, the likelihood they were smokers is high. But I guess here's what I think we're looking at. I think we're looking at something very explainable, but I think the problem is the rarity at which this is occurring. I don't think that's what this was either. I think this is a different thing. But I think the rarity with which we're seeing it means that we don't have enough data to actually decide what this is. And you have the problem of people discounting this so it doesn't get investigated properly. Even the newer cases don't get investigated in depth enough to have a store of knowledge for the next time this happens to compare it to. And some of the other ones were old enough cases we just don't have anything saved from it because nobody thought we might need to. So I think we have something explainable here. And I don't think it's that we have some people have some sort of weird chemical composition in them that makes them some sort of, like a fire just comes out of them. I think it's some external source. I think in the one lady's case, we have the heater right next to her. And two of the others seem to be somewhere near a source of heat. Right? The one had a coal fire in the room, and while you may not have had the coal fire initially ignite it, coal fires spark a lot compared to wood. I think it's very possible you could have had a spark and the dehydrating effect. They may have died, right, while sitting in front of the fire, and you may have had a spark that lit her. The other guy in 2010, he was again right next to
a fireplace,
a small format fireplace. I think what we have here is a combination of prolonged heat, something that sparks a fire, this sort of already pre-dehydrating body, and then I don't think it's as simple as the wick effect. I think you probably have some other factors that we can't account for because we weren't there and nobody did any good forensic work. That's what I think we have going on. I don't think it's not paranormal. It's not somebody's body chemicals spontaneously starting on fire. I don't think it's think it's spontaneous. The people I don't think are the source of the initial start of the fire. As to what it actually is, I just don't think we have enough facts or research. I think nobody takes it seriously as something that we ought to know so that we could avoid it. I think maybe don't fall asleep in front of the fire though. I think that I think I'm getting that from the from where all these people were, and the one lady's a known smoker and took pills and was next to the heater. I think just don't fall asleep next to open heat sources.
Yeah, the lady I investigated that didn't, I mean, she had burns. She didn't die of the burns. She died of smoke inhalation, and she was smoking in bed after having been drinking.
Yeah, and I think maybe don't fall asleep.
It's sort of a closed room, right? And it acted kind of as an oven and got real hot in there, but she was dead by the time that happened. So, well,
what do you think?
I kind of agree with what you're saying to some point. Anytime you have a person who is unalive and there's a fire, you need to be very, very, very careful. I investigated a fire, and there were 3 persons in the fire that were unalive. It was a very tragic situation. They were very young people. We determined it was an accidental fire. I'll bet you I took 300 or 400 pictures and documented in feet and inches where they were compared to windows and doors. I mean, it probably took me 10 hours to complete an investigation there.
See, with all that, you could almost rebuild a whole model.
Right. So much so.
All that data.
Yeah. So much so that I had to call another investigator to come help me.
And that was in the 80s?
That was in
Or
the
early
90s.
90s. Early 90s.
Murder sells papers, Timor says. Fabricating murder is a real thing. Many more cases of this. Some of the more famous would be the O.J. Dahmer, Manson, right? So
Yeah.
So I think that I think anytime you have a fire and you have someone who's not alive, who's in the fire, near the fire's touched them, the fire's burned them. I think you have to carefully look into it. And so, like the guy, they said the only way they could get the fire out was putting the fire hose through the slit in his stomach. Let's talk about that one. That's weird. How do we know that's not maybe an assassination attempt, or actually a consummated assassination? And that could be a weird government assassination with some kind of a
thermite
chemical, right?
I was just thinking thermite. Yeah,
something
thermite.
weird like that. That dude that we saw on the stairs, even though they said it was just very limited stuff, it didn't look very limited to me.
Looked pretty extensive.
Looked pretty
like
extensive.
The ceiling came down and all kinds of stuff.
I would be highly suspicious there. But this thing here in this chair that we're looking at right now, I think it was a woman here. This is just really odd. And maybe this is the wicking effect. It's probably a lot of things. As people, we like big ideas, right? We like big ideas. And we always like some mystery, some sort of myth or something. So we have this whole idea of spontaneous human combustion. If we spontaneously combusted, we would not have been able to survive as a species.
Right.
I just don't think there's such a thing as spontaneous combustion. I think there's a fire source somewhere. In the case of that woman where they said there was no fire source, there was just a little coal fire in the grate. Listen,
it
sparks.
Yeah, and coal fires spark a lot.
Sparks.
Because the kind of coal they're talking about is not the kind of coal that we currently dig up for power plants. The coal we dig up for power plants is half dirt. The coal they're talking about is anthracite coal. Anthracite coal is a crystalline type of coal that's very pure.
Right.
It's like this, but the other thing that you get with anthracite coal is tar. It's in the coal. Now you can bake it out, but when you're buying coal for small coal fires, you didn't. And that tar sparks, and the sparks are little bits of that tar it pops and it flings a little bit of that tar and it sits there and it goes out. But that onto some fabric would be very easy. Now you've put it on another burning on another fuel source with a little bit left over.
Right.
Anthracite coal is that. There's a reason no one uses that for fires.
And Timor says a fire investigation is usually the most difficult crime scene to piece together, usually with multiple investigators, fire specialists, and detectives. True.
Now.
And let me say a little bit more about that. About 15 years ago, our law firm represented a doctor who was accused of burning down and nearly killing himself a rent house he lived in. The truth was he'd been drinking and fell asleep on the couch with a cigarette in his hand, and it was entirely accidental. But we had a whole felony arson trial because they claimed to have found pour patterns for gasoline on the floor. Turns out it was the glue patterns
of the
for how the carpet was nailed down. And so even in this relatively modern era, there are competence that you need to investigate a fire is, at least where we are in Northwest Arkansas, no offense to any of our police friends, the competence to investigate that here is a lot lower than it is in other places. And it's hard, it's complex, it takes a lot of man or woman hours, person hours. It's very, very difficult.
And if only it were like CSI, where they just have the one case that they're working on for weeks. They just have the one. They're not working on anything else. They're just working on this one case. Except it's never like that. They're working hundreds of cases.
And they never find the one fiber. It's none of that.
There's never the smoking gun, the magic bullet.
Any of these things
never
are
like
just not
that.
true. I think generally spontaneous human combustion does not exist. I think there's a fire source. Perhaps some of it's from wicking. I think a lot of it might have created a situation to cover something up. And some of this stuff is going to be lost to history, lost to antiquity. We're just not going to know. This picture right here in front of us, we're never gonna know.
Yeah.
Things back from the 50s and before, no way. No way. I mean, I can tell compelling stories of things the church has documented of all sorts of stuff from the 15 and 1600s
that we'll never know.
But we'll just never know. We'll say, well, this is probably reliable. Here's the thing, but we don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys that in a vacuum, maybe this happened. Maybe there was some extenuating circumstances that ignited this fire, and it only worked in this one specific set of circumstances. And that's why we only see sparse examples throughout history from 1600s all the way up to 2010. We've only got 5, maybe 6 examples. And I think that's why we have that, because in this perfect set of examples, sure, somebody could fall asleep with a cigarette and they're going to ignite some stuff, but it's only going to burn them. I don't feel like this is anything paranormal at all, as much as I want it to be, because y'all know
the body setting itself on fire.
Yeah, it's not like the X-Files said. It's not somebody with some paranormal aspect that makes them create a heat source from the inside of the body. Isn't? I really don't think that's it. There's, it's not real. And I hate to say it, but we're gonna get the sad horn. But this one isn't real, folks. It's just, this isn't.
Well, it's real, and
these people are really burning.
They're unalive, but it's not because of some unknown spontaneous thing, a death ray from aliens or from an angry god, or
I think
a weird chemical reaction. It's just they burned up.
It's unknown in that it's unresearched,
right?
But I don't think it's unknowable.
Right.
And I don't think if we actually had enough cases and it was actually researched that you'd be like, I think you'd be like, right. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I think it'd be more like, I think that would be the reaction.
Right.
Even if we had the concrete answer, I still think it'd be not, some spectacular revelation. I think you'd be like, I think it's likely more like rare circumstances, and a lot of bad luck.
Timor says Fantastic Four debunked.
Yeah.
Debunked. We ruin everything.
Yeah.
Well, sorry,
yeah.
man.
That's the worst part, because we always it's almost always the ones that we love the most. We're like,
Right.
oh yeah, let's cover this.
What did we talk about 2 weeks ago? I was so disappointed. I just didn't believe it. Oh,
jeez. Hold on. Let me look.
It's kind of like this. I wanted this to have a little more mystery and intrigue, but once you start piecing through it, thinking about it, looking at the stuff and just examining it piece by piece, it's like the thing I said last time. When you examine each of the pieces themselves,
they're interesting by themselves. But they together, you cannot add things together and say, well, the totality of the circumstance, the totality of all the evidences. No, because if one part of it's not good, it doesn't bolster anything else. You can't put a bunch of half pieces together and expect it to make a nice.
A bunch of half pieces together don't make a whole.
Don't make a bunch of whole pieces.
Our last episode was the Rendlesham Forest UFO landing.
Oh the military base.
Yeah, I wanted that one to be to just.
So did I.
Real.
Yeah.
But when you pulled that apart and you just started examining it piece by piece, it just the whole thing falls apart. Because I really thought that was some of the better evidence of actual connection.
Yeah.
With some kind of a
military personnel. We had a military radio chatter,
right?
And we still decided it was not real.
It's not real.
Well, we have a strangely or an unexpectedly diverse set of skills or points of view just between the three of us.
Right.
Backgrounds, points of views, and experiences to be able to weed through this stuff. And when you combine all that together, we can usually stitch together a more realistic picture. Not because we don't, Victus's poster in the background is true. We want to believe.
Right.
We really want to run across that one that you're just like, oh wow, it's true. You know, we really want that reaction. You know, the problem is I think you get that reaction when you just read the headline. Right?
Yeah.
When you're just reading the headline and you don't dig too deep, a lot of stuff can sound really fantastic. But when you start really being honest about the facts and not let confirmation bias get in the way.
Right.
You know, confirmation bias, I think, accounts for a lot of these. A lot of the stuff that we end up debunking, I think confirmation bias counts for a lot. Because, like Paul said, we really want there to be we want magic in the world, right? We want a big idea. We want something fantastic. We want, we want a ghost to walk up on the front step. Like we want to see those things, and I think people end up seeing the things that they want. Not in every case, but in several of our more exciting ones.
Yeah. Timor says, I always compare hunting for the truth like Shawshank, where you climb through miles of S to get to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is exactly that. Yeah, you have to wade through a bunch of garbage before you
This is
stumble
one
across
that I was
nuggets of
kind of,
nice.
I guess I'm a little disappointed to say there's no such thing as spontaneous human combustion. I just don't think that's a thing. And I sort of wanted there to be something. I didn't really have an opinion probably one way or the other about it. I know what the National Institutes of Health says, but I hadn't really looked deep into it. But darn, I wanted this to be a little more mysterious than, well, family just died and caught fire.
Yeah.
Lucky the whole house didn't burn down, I guess.
Right? All right. So we're in agreement. Spontaneous human combustion is not a real thing.
Not a thing.
So what are we doing a rapid fire next week? Because we're a week off now.
Yeah,
we're doing
a rapid fire.
And we'll catch it up next month.
Tim, are you going to be here next week to talk about whatever crazy things we're talking about on Rapid Fire?
Oh, geez. Timor, you're going to love the Rapid Fire.
It's fun. Lots of pictures. Lots of videos.
So Rapid Fire.
Some of it's good. Some of it's really terrible, which we also like.
We find pictures, phenomena, UFOs, whatever, and we just go through a bunch of them. Say, okay, is this real? Is this real? Okay, what does it look like? What do we think?
Yeah,
the best and worst of social media.
Yeah, we generally pull videos from like Instagram, whatever looks paranormal, and we send it to the official podcast, Instagram profile, and we go through all of it that we get that month, and we dig through them. Yeah, we'll be glad to have you here.
He says, sounds like fun. Excellent, man.
Excellent. Well, we really look forward to having you here next week. Excellent. Yes. So next week is rapid fire. I mean, we've already got like 15 or 20. I think I've sent like at least 10 or 15.
I've sent a few to you while I've been on the phone with insurance companies, and I quick send you stuff because I'm scrolling through.
That's what we do, waiting on the phone to get adjusters to answer our phone calls.
Yeah. So Timor, if you find anything half interesting on Instagram,
you can
that
send
looks,
it too, and we'll cover it.
Yeah, you can send it in, and we'll give you a shout out and all that stuff. Look for our logo. This is our logo up here, and it's Beyond the Shadows podcast on Instagram. Find what you want and send it to us. We'll check it out, and we'll give our honest opinion on it. And we generally rip through like 15, 20, sometimes maybe more, depending on the videos and what you find. We look forward to having you next week. And do you have any closing statements you want to take us out with, good sir?
So, on the subject of seeing what we want to see, everyone knows that humans, or at least I assume most people know, that humans are pattern recognition creatures. It's part of why our myths are similar across most civilizations. We have common ideas. You can say it's based on common human neurology. However you might want to explain it, but we really want there to be myth and mystery, and the more we progress with being able to gather photographs and data and analyze things down to the molecule, I think we're starting to see some of that mystery and awe at the what could be disappearing. And I think this accounts for some of the resurgence of accounts of ghosts, and why social media is so full of even not very good believable video about UFOs. I think we're losing we're losing the myths about fairies in the woods and that sort of thing. But I am here to tell you, not all the magic and mystery is gone. Some of it still remains. And if you still feel that urge to find mystery and magic and the unknown in this world, then you should follow us.
Beyond the Shadows.
Good night.
Good night.
A creature like that, how would it ever die?
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Looked like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows.